Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's joint work session with the Board of Adjustment. The items on the agenda are neighborhood zoning and sign regulations. Just a couple points before we go around and introduce ourselves. We'll be taking no public comment or input tonight. This is just a work session, so I'd like to keep it to just the two boards. If you've got a question, just pull the microphone right up to you so that we can get good recording of it. Rick Tainter, after we do introductions, is going to do probably a 15 or 20-minute presentation. We're going to start out initially with neighborhood zoning. If we get through that, we'll get into signage. But our main goal is obviously to get through the neighborhood zoning, and then we'll get into the sign regulations. So with that being said, if we could start down with Rick, just introduce yourself for everyone.
Rick Tainter, Planning Director.
Norm Patnod, alternate Planning Board.
John Rice, Planning Board.
William Gladhill, Planning Board.
Donald Coker, Planning Board.
Cindy Hayden, Planning Board, Deputy Secretary.
Paige Roberts, Planning Board.
John Ritchie, Planning Board.
David Witham, Board of Adjustment.
Alan Juice, Board of Adjustment.
Arthur Parrott, Board of Adjustment.
Charlie LeMay, Board of Adjustment.
Carol Eaton, Board of Adjustment.
Robin Russo, Board of Adjustment.
Derek Durbin, Board of Adjustment.
Lee J. Feldman, Principal Planner.
Richard Hopley, Planning Board.
Great. Well, Board of Adjustment members, thank you for coming. I always find these joint work sessions to be enlightening. Oftentimes things come up that you think you got things covered, and we get a different perspective. So thank you all for coming. That being said, I'm going to turn it right over to Rick Tainter.
Okay, thank you. This is a project that we have talked about for quite some time. Back in 2006, when we started looking at the zoning ordinance revision project, one of the things we did is we looked at neighborhoods throughout the city to see how well the existing zoning conformed to actually what's out there on the ground, the development patterns. And this is an excerpt from that study. We actually looked at all of the districts in the city, not just the residential districts, but this table here is just the residential districts. And what it says is that the significant numbers of lots in neighborhoods all across the city don't comply with the zoning regulations, which is a problem. If you look at the next to the right-hand column, you'll see that 60% of the lots in the SRB district and the GRB district don't conform just based on area. And also in the MRO district, and smaller percentages, but all of these areas I think are 30% or close to 30% or more of the lots don't comply. And you even get down to lots that are less than 75% of the minimum lot area, and you still have significant amounts, nearly 50% of the lots in the SRB and GRB district across the city. This is not just in the historic neighborhoods, but just averaging across the whole city don't comply with the minimum lot area for their zoning, for their district. And part of this problem is that the zoning has changed over time, and changes have been made probably to address specific situations. I don't really know why, but as you can see from this chart, from 1951 to 1966 to today, lot area requirements have increased considerably across the city. And new districts have been added with higher lot areas, and it's just been an issue where those districts were created and they were applied on the existing development pattern. This is not unique to Portsmouth. Lots of cities and towns do this. They have essentially a historic community, and they try to apply what's essentially a suburban kind of development density to it, and it doesn't really fit. The problem is that it requires too many homeowners to come to the Board of Adjustment for a change which probably, if you're looking at it not with your Board of Adjustment hat on, is a perfectly reasonable change. It's just like what is around you and what is around the house and the entire neighborhood. But if you start putting your Board of Adjustment hat on, you can't grant a variance because there's nothing unique about it. So it's a real problem. You have to kind of go through contortions in order to make it fit the scheme. So we'll just take you quickly a little bit through what we did. We have the GIS system, which gives us a lot more ability to analyze the city fairly quickly compared to what it would be if we didn't have it. So we started by just breaking down the city into these categories of lot area. less than 5,000 square feet, 5,000 to 7,500, 7,500 to 15,000, 15,000 to an acre, and greater than an acre. And that's because that's where most of the dividing points between the different zoning districts are. And you can see, as you might expect, that there are a lot of lots that are less than 5,000 square feet. This is the very smallest ones right in the historic core of the city. Unfortunately, in a lot of those areas, we don't allow 5,000 square foot lots. So we move from there to, and this, I'm sorry, this one is a little bit harder to see, but all of the lots that are colored here in any color are lots that are too small for the zoning district that they're in. They're non-conforming, and you can see there are large clusters. On the left-hand side here, this is interesting, John was just asking me about this. Here we have Elwyn Park over here and the Woodlands down here, and you can see that big difference. It's the same zoning district, but very different situation in terms of conforming versus non-conforming. And in fact, when Elwyn Park was first started to be developed, I believe the minimum lot size was 4,500 square feet. Now it's 15,000 square feet. So fortunately, most of the lots in the area were developed around 7,000 to 8,000 square feet, so they didn't go to the density that was allowed at the time. Probably the developer developed to the market. They gave the people what they wanted in terms of lot area, or in terms of what was the most appropriate for the developer in terms of his goals. So what you end up with is essentially a lot pattern where lots and lots of lots are non-conforming, have to do get a variance to do practically anything in that neighborhood in terms of any expansion. And so again, this is just a summary, just focusing in on the Richards, Lincoln, Miller Avenue area, and looking at the number of non-conforming lots just by, again, this is non-conforming just by area in those areas. And at the time we sent out the map to you over the weekend and sent out the memo again over the weekend, we only had this information. We didn't have the frontage information, which we've added, and it makes it a little bit more refined analysis. So here's what we did. We printed out the maps, and staff went through and went area by area, trying to figure out what might be appropriate changes to make, how we might look at different area and frontage requirements in different parts of the city. And, we had a lot of things that were like this with a big question mark. We didn't really know what to do with or this, but we had to come up with a strategy just to throw out for response. So we came out with a map that you got, this map of potential change areas. And it's just, again, a very preliminary map. It's not a formal recommendation at this point. What we have is we have the districts colored by, all of the residential districts colored by the district that they are, so that or not all of them, we didn't include the rural districts, but the SRA district and the SRB district and the GRA and the GRB and what else do we have here? And then we have some of these are shown with hatching on them. Those are the areas that we're proposing or suggesting for some change. And just to focus in on some, we have here the Frank Jones neighborhood in yellow and the Christian Shores neighborhood in the tan color. And I'll have some analysis. I'll show you a little bit about the Christian Shores neighborhood just as an example. And then again, the Miller, Lincoln, Richards Avenue here, the South End, historic South End. This area of Court Street, which is right now zoned mixed residence office, but really makes more sense because of the uses there and the lot sizes. We're proposing to consider that for going to mixed residence business, and it is adjacent to the central business, so that sort of makes sense as a transitional area. Again, Elwyn Park and the Woodlands below it. Maple Haven and some other lots out on Ocean Road. And then Panaway Manor, and you're getting kind of a theme here of some of these old neighborhoods that built largely in the 50s and some earlier than that just have been, they were conformed to zoning when they were constructed. They no longer conform to zoning. It's not their fault, it's our fault. So this is an example of what we're trying to do. This is Elwyn Park. We looked at 350 lots in Elwyn Park, and the area in green, this is where we start bringing in the frontage analysis. The area in green in the lower right-hand corner are the lots that comply with both the minimum lot area and the minimum frontage requirements. And that is a 15,000 square foot minimum lot area and 100 feet of frontage. And then the area in blue is the area that we could bring into compliance if we reduce the lot area to 7,500 square feet and reduce the frontage to 75 square feet. So that's kind of the way we're looking at this. And again, this is very simplistic because even though lot area and frontage is better than lot area, it's not everything. So we need to look at things like building setbacks and how they're laid out, and that would be part of our next analysis. And then here's a graph to try to help you visualize this a little bit more. This is Christian Shores, and this is just lot area. And if you can see along the bottom, it's percent of lots. So as you go from left to right, you're catching more and more of the lots in that neighborhood. And there's something on the order of, I can't remember how many lots we looked at here. It's again close to 300, I believe. And the vertical red line is the halfway point. That's 50% of the lots. And the horizontal red line shows you what the median lot area is, the lot area above which above and below are the same number of lots. So the median lot area in this neighborhood is 7664 square feet. And another way to look at it is, well, what would happen if we tried to get 80% of the lots to conform? Just as an arbitrary goal. Let's have only 20% non-conforming, even though it seems like a lot of non-conforming lots. Let's use 80% as our goal. So if we did that, if we dropped the minimum lot area to 4,157 square feet, then we'd make 80% of the lots conform. Everybody with me on this right now? Okay. This is just a different way to do it with a different scale on the left-hand side, just to show you, to be able to focus in a little bit more on that. And then adding a couple more lines to it, the current required lot area is 7,500 square feet. So the current required lot area is almost the same as the number above which half of the lots lie. So half of the lots are non-conforming. You can just see it directly from that line. And so if we were able to, and we were suggesting dropping it down to 5,000 square feet. So if we brought it down to 5,000 square feet, we'd get it down to roughly 27% of the lots being non-conforming. So that's really kind of, in very simple terms, what we're trying to do. Again, we're trying to do it with lot area and frontage, and we'll be trying to look at it again with building setbacks as well. As a result of this study, we're suggesting a couple of new districts. We're suggesting another single residence district and another general residence district. Single residence, as the name implies, allows single residences. General residence districts allow two-family and in some cases multifamily dwellings. So we're suggesting that we have another single residence district that has the same lot area as the largest general residence, a single residence C, 7,500 square feet. And that's the example that I was showing with Elwyn Park. We're also suggesting that we add a general residence D, which is for the very densest areas of the city. And the examples I'll give you are Atlantic Heights and the South End, where you've got very tiny lots, and it's very hard to get conformity anywhere close to our existing zoning ordinance. And one of the things that has happened over time with our ordinance, I don't know why it happened, is that the lot area, we have a lot area requirement and a lot area per dwelling unit requirement. And right now they're the same. And most communities have a lot area requirement and a lot area per dwelling unit that is somewhat lower than the total lot area. So, for example, if you had a lot area per dwelling unit of 5,000 square feet in the GRA, you would require a 7,500 square foot lot for a single family and a 10,000 square foot lot for a two-family. You wouldn't actually require it to be doubled. And we find an awful lot of this in the city, where you've got two-family, three-family, four-families that are way denser than would be allowed by the zoning, and yet that's the way the city is developed. That's the character of some of these neighborhoods. And we're also suggesting that the MRB district have its minimum lot area reduced from 7,500 to 5,000 square feet, because that really is more in keeping with what that kind of area is right now as well. So I know this is a tough chart to follow, but I'm just going to take you through it just to give you these examples of these 5 neighborhoods. And we have, in this example, we've got 2 neighborhoods that are single residence B, a general residence A, and 2 that are general residence B. And what we have right now is a case where down here, we're proposing like single residence B going to single residence C for both of these. That's the new district. And general residence A going to general residence B, general residence B going to a new general residence D. And what we would come up with is in Elwyn Park, we would move these are lots that conform to both area and frontage. Right now, only 16% of the lots in Elwyn Park conform to both area and frontage. We could get them up to 93%. In Maple Haven, only 3%?
3%.
3% of the lots conform. We could get it up to 84%. Christian Shores, interestingly, even by dropping from 7,500 to 5,000 square feet, we would only be increasing conformance from 18% to 27%. So we may want to look at that a little bit more. South End would go from 9% to 47%, and Atlantic Heights would go from 5% to 41%. And then the flip side of that is we don't want to create situations where we're adding more density as we reduce lot area. So we also looked at how many of these lots with just these two dimensions could potentially split in the future. And right now in Elwyn Park, in the database we were looking at, there was only one lot that had enough frontage under current zoning to split, enough frontage and area to split into two lots. Under the reduced, it would be 21. So we'd want to look at that and see where those were and whether the boundaries of what we're drawing is different, should be different. Maple Haven, very little difference, go from 1 to 2. Christian Shores goes from 2 to 19. The South End goes from 1 to 10, and Atlantic Heights goes from 4 to 7. While I've got this up, does anybody have any questions about what I'm showing here? Yeah, Robin, yeah.
What's the history? Why are these lot sizes larger than what?
Well, I think probably what happened is that, I don't know the answer, but I think what probably happened is that as the city started growing at some point, sometime between the 60s and 70s and 80s, there might have been concern that there's going to be too much development. So lot sizes were increased, but they were increased both in the undeveloped areas and in the areas that were already developed. So that's why we don't want to just take the existing zoning districts and roll them back to what they were before. We want to be focused on those neighborhoods where there's lots of nonconformity. We want to tailor the zoning to those neighborhoods. In those zoning areas where there isn't a lot of nonconformity, we can leave the zoning alone.
What's your goal in doing this exercise?
The goal is to make it easier for homeowners, property owners, to do developments that are consistent with the neighborhood, and to avoid creating roadblocks to normal home improvements. If both of your neighbors have a lot that is that is 75 feet wide, you should be able to have a lot that's 75 feet wide, even though the zoning says 100. I mean, if everybody in the neighborhood has that same pattern, you shouldn't be forced to go through a variance process just to do what everybody else in the neighborhood is doing. And particularly because the Board of Adjustment has to determine in granting a variance that what's on that lot is different from everything else. And so that's, we're trying to make that a little bit, reduce some of the burden, unnecessary burden on homeowners and property owners.
Have you thought of an alternative way to deal with this? In other words, why can't you allow a certain increase in building coverage to accommodate renovations or small additions like a porch or a garage, an increase in lot coverage for non-conforming lots instead of changing the size of the lot to be in conformance? Because what this does is encourage new developments or subdivisions and more denser subdivisions coming down the pike.
As I said, we're not doing that. We're looking very carefully at this to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think this is probably the cleanest way to do it, so to make sure that your master plan reflects what you want the city to be.
More denser subdivisions?
As dense as it is right now. As dense as it is right now.
Mm-hmm. But we're talking about future subdivisions.
We're not talking about changing the land use regulations for future development. We're talking about looking at areas that are fully developed right now and making the regulations make sense for those areas.
And all those homeowners really care about is being able to put a porch or a garage on, like their neighbors have, which increase lot coverage for non-conforming lots would do the same trick rather than allow for more denser subdivisions coming down the pike.
I guess it's a question of philosophy. I don't like to have the master plan say we want a low-density city, when in fact we want a city that's like it is right now.
Well, a high-density city, if we allow for this, it's more of a stress and burden on our city services.
It's not gonna
More
change-
children in school, every child in school is
It's not going to change.
$10,000.
It's not going to change the city. What we're saying is we're looking at making the zoning match what's already there.
But we're talking about future developments. This is what this affects.
No, it
You're
doesn't.
allowing lot size to be large.
Now, I guess we have to disagree on that. I don't agree with that. Yeah.
Hold on just a minute. Ms. Hayden, you just had a comment, then Mr. Coker.
Just a
So-
quick comment that I think maybe some confusion is, this is really targeted at specific districts that are already developed.
Yes.
We don't have much subdividable land anyway, and I think I'm correct, in those neighborhoods, there's no tracts that would be subdivided. When you, and maybe it's confusing because that last line down there that talks about potential lot splits, there's no true subdividable land except to possibly take a lot and chop it
Yeah,
too.
you'd
There's
have to-
no subdividable land that is affected by, in any of those neighborhoods. If we applied this
Correct.
to our really, really rural areas where there might be
Yeah.
a 5-acre parcel that could be subdivided, then I see what you're saying, Robert, but I think
Yeah.
this is not what we're talking about applying it to.
And in fact, we're only looking at two dimensions here, lot area and frontage, and we know there's information that's just not quantitative, but if you look at the Christian Shores neighborhood, of those 19 potential lot splits, probably all of them are, or most of them are, in the largest lots in Christian Shores are along North Mill Pond, and they are very severely restricted by wetlands regulations as well, so that they would be very unlikely. So if we started adding some of those things in, really getting into it, I'm sure we'd find much less ability to split. And again, this is all very preliminary.
Mr. Coker, just grab the microphone if you would, Don. Thank you.
Rick, I just so I can understand this clearly, that last line, suggested zoning, if it were adopted, that 21 lots in Elwyn Park could in fact be developed.
Just on the basis of those two dimensions, yes.
Okay.
Lot area and frontage.
However, if they were developed, they would look like all the other lots in the neighborhood anyway.
As a matter of fact, there are some, in Elwyn Park, there are some double lots, where there are, a property owner has bought two lots, you can still see them on the map as double lots, and there's a house on one, or the house may be across the lot line. So that's what it is.
And just for the sake of discussion, if that owner were to split the lots, and another house would be put on that newly subdivided lot, it would look like the rest of the neighborhood
Yes.
anyway, is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
So, and Rick, just one more point, and I think we've all said it, but I just want to try to clarify. Potential lot splits would be, out of the 21, you could have the frontage, but you've got a house in the middle of the lot that would need to.
Right.
So I think vacant lots in Elwyn Park, and I think there's only two.
I can only think of two.
Yeah, I could think of two that literally are grass that, so the rest of them would be either relocating the house, which in all reality, I don't think you'd get the value to build two new homes on. So I just want to clarify that, so.
One more point, it's not necessarily that they're going to look like each other, it's adding to the tax burden to the city. Every new house adds to the tax burden of the city. Any residential home adds to the tax burden of the city. So that's really the issue, more so than it looks like every other house on the block. We have to think about that, the bigger picture here.
Yeah, and I think the exercise, and I'll let other people speak, the exercise is actually, in my opinion, to benefit the homeowners so that they're not continually coming back to BOA for a non-conforming lot when in fact they're just like everybody on their neighbor. I live in Elwyn Park. I had to come back when I wanted to put a garage, extend my garage. So I like this because I think it brings it into conformity. I think it makes it so that people don't need to go back to the BOA. So that's just my opinion. I thought this was a great idea, so I'll let other board members. Ms. Hayden and then Mr. Coker.
Just a quick comment for anybody that's watching at home, that this is not a proposal that we're rolling out tomorrow. What you're looking at is an analysis and report that has to go through a lot more review, and it's not even the full report yet. It's part of the analysis, and the more that we look at it, the more we say, well, we got to look at other things than just lot size and frontage.
Right.
Just in case people are watching and confused, this will not happen
All
tomorrow.
three of them.
All three of them.
Mr. Coker, did you have a
Thank you.
comment?
I think,
Don,
Ms.
Don, just grab it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think Ms. Russo's point is very well taken. It is my understanding, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, that from a tax revenue versus cost to the city, so to speak, for city services, sewer, fire, police, and all that, a homeowner is a net loser for the city. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing for the city would be to take all the neighborhoods and turn them into commercial developments.
Right, but we're not going to do that, obviously. So I think the unintended consequences of this, I think, is something that probably should be considered, because I think that's a valid point.
And look at alternative solutions to allow for these homeowners to have a reasonable renovation, a garage or a porch, without having to come before the Board of Adjustment, but not allow for neighborhoods to be denser.
So, again, the trade-offs, sort of what we're talking about, we want to reduce the number of non-conforming lots, but we want to minimize undesired density increases, and with a nod to Mr. Coker, I quoted unintended consequences. And then the other balance is simplicity versus flexibility. We want, if we had more districts, a finer kind of grain of zoning districts, we'd be able to get the regulations to be closer to individual neighborhood patterns. But fewer districts is a simpler zoning ordinance and a simpler zoning map. So we're trying to balance those kinds of things. And what again, this is the very first look at this. And what we're going to do is we're going to look more closely at the neighborhoods. Some of those areas where there might potentially be lot splits, look at those areas to see whether they are different from other parts of the neighborhood. We're creating a data layer for the front setbacks, the distance between the principal building and the street line, so we can look at that, because that's another area where many neighborhoods are non-conforming right now, where and they can be. It's also rear setbacks. It's harder to look at. But we're going to start with front setbacks, and we'll be coming up with recommendations for changes to the existing districts. In other words, changes to the dimensional regulations of the existing districts. One of the things we pointed out in the memo was that a lot of our zoning districts call for lots that are wider than they are deep, where in fact the traditional pattern in Portsmouth is lots that are narrower and deeper, long, thin lots with houses maybe at the front and yards in the back. And so that would be one general change that would probably solve a lot of problems right there. Looking at those new districts, what I've called the SRB and the GRD, and then going from there and actually looking at specific neighborhood zoning changes. So that's where we are. That's what we're talking about. And we've had some discussion already, but I'm open to all sorts of ideas that you have. And if there are neighborhoods that you can think of that are, especially from the Board of Adjustment, where you see lots of variance requests or problems in terms of frontage variances, area variances, front yards variances, or some other variance that you think that I haven't even talked about, I'd certainly like to hear that right now, and we could incorporate that into our study.
Mr. Coker?
If you could, Rick, could you put one more bullet in there and do, I don't know how to properly phrase it, but tax impact, revenue versus expenses impact, whatever you want to put it.
Yep. Cost benefit, yep.
I think another key point on that slide, Rick, that we should show is, of those 21 lots, what percentage is that of the neighborhood? I think it's, 6%?
Right.
I think Christian Shore might have been, 1%. So, if you look at Maple Haven, it's, a 0.5%?
Yep.
So I think that's important, too, that, when you look at 21, you think it's a lot, but in relationship to 340, so I think that's, because I know we deal with this all the time when you look at suggested zoning, potential lot splits. The reality is, of those 21, probably 18 are unrealistic that they'd be developed, and I think it's,
right.
It's 2 or 3, I think, that are raw. So I think that's important, too, that in print it looks like it can be, but in reality it's probably not practical.
I'm going to go back to this slide, because this kind of shows that if you were to look, say at the green area right now here, which are the currently conforming lots, if you added up the lots that currently conform only to lot area, you've got 33%, the 23% and the 10% of the right-hand side. So you've got 33% of lots that conform to area, and then along the bottom you've got 41% that conform to frontage, 23 and 7 and 11. So you got 33 and 41. But then when you actually get to when you combine them together, you get down to where are we? 16%. So it's, as you start adding factors in, other regulations in, the numbers get smaller and smaller. So I'm sure that as we start adding in wetlands regulations and so forth, the 19 at Christian Shores will drop. And I don't know what might affect Elwyn Park, but all those numbers will change. We may say that the changes we're proposing aren't enough. One of the things that I think would be that is kind of the most radical thing here probably is this GRD district. Our smallest zoning district right now is 3,500 square feet. This is saying we would have a zoning district in which a unit could be on 2,000 square foot lot. It sounds crazy, but you look at the south end and only 47% of the lots could actually meet that requirement. So it's one of the things that we have to think about a lot as to what kind of density we want to not allow, but how we accommodate what's there right now, the historic development pattern, because there are the lots in the south end and the lots in Atlantic Heights are very, very dense. We have lots that are much smaller than 2,000 square feet.
Paige had a comment, and then Cindy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, first of all, thank you. This is a huge amount of work, obviously, went into pulling all this data together and putting it in a format that's understandable, so I appreciate that. And I'd like to say I feel like I'm actually kind of thrilled about this. It seems like, like you said, after 30 years, we're finally getting back to kind of creating these regulations that reflect as much compliance as we can get. And that's kind of cool, because as you said, the goal partly is not just helping out the individual property owners, but I think trying to having a master plan and a zoning ordinance that's going to reflect our policy objectives over the long term for land use, which is, in some cases, this balance of what level of density do we want. And I think, we're in a really good place in terms of density. So if we can get this ordinance to reflect that, it's a real juggling act. So I was wondering about, I don't know if it was Maple Haven, the South End, and Atlantic Heights, thinking somewhere in one of these graphs or charts it showed, I don't know if it was this one, maybe it was, it was going to be sort of, there were still going to be quite a few high percentage of lots that weren't going to be
right down here, so that Christian Shores, 27% would still be non-conforming, even if we drop the lot area down to 5,000
Yeah,
square feet.
I guess I'm thinking about that, and do we care? What can we do to get it conforming? Does that matter?
I guess one thing I'd like to think about is, what is a good split is,
right.
if right now 60% of the lots are non-conforming, only 40% are conforming, is 80% a good target to have for conforming? Do we still like the idea of 20% of the lots being non-conforming? Or, is it somewhere in between? If we, just looking at this, I see, boy, my first one I did was Elwyn Park, by the way, and I said 93%, boy, that's great, And then I got progressively more discouraged as I went along. Maple Haven, I think 84%, I was aiming for 80%, so 84% is still pretty good. But, then you get down here and you still have a large number of people. look at this, you've got, 3/4 out of 367 homeowners are going to be non-conforming here, and half of 170 homeowners in the South End would be non-conforming, and more than 100 in the Atlantic Heights would be non-conforming. So it still hasn't gotten far enough, and yet then you start running up against the potential for adding more density. Exactly what Ms. Russo was suggesting. So,
right.
I think we need to be careful about.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's an easy way to look at
Yeah.
what it would look like at 60% versus 80%, or if that's just such a
Well, I think
enormous amount of work.
Well, I don't think it would be an enormous amount of work. It would be an enormous amount of work to do every possible permutation.
Right.
But if we settle on a few ideas, and some neighborhoods will be, I think Elwyn Park is almost a no-brainer, but some neighborhoods will be difficult. So the South End might be a challenge, and the Christian Shores might be a challenge, and getting out to the Frank Jones neighborhood is a challenge because there's much more variety out there. There's in some of these inner neighborhoods, there's a lot of consistency, but when you get further out, there's some small lots and some big lots all intermingled, so it's harder to come up with an appropriate answer there. But I think if we try a few different alternatives, and then we can map them out for you and say, what does this look like? What does this look like? And then you'll know, because you know these neighborhoods, and you'll know whether this makes sense.
Cindy, got a comment?
Yeah, and I guess that leads me to think, we don't want to necessarily get to 100% conformance, but what are the most important parameters? Is lot area the most important, and then it's frontage, or?
I think that the most, getting back to what Ms. Russo said, the most, it's most important, I think, to have the lot pattern, which is lot area and frontage, be kind of appropriate.
Because it most affects the feel of the neighborhood, the look of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and because it basically is, it's problematic if a huge number of your lots are in violation of zoning, or non-conforming, I won't say in violation, but in non-conforming to zoning, because it basically undercuts your master plan. So if you can get that right and say, here's, these numbers right, then I think it's easier to do something where you've got some flexibility with setbacks, like side setbacks. I know communities that have special procedures for reducing setbacks on one side if there's a greater setback on the other side, that type of thing. And you can have more flexibility there. So it's probably, you can probably do more with perhaps a special exception, which doesn't require the proof of hardship with a setback, and then try to get the lot frontage and lot area correct.
David?
Just like this, just state, I share with Paige's sentiment about the excitement of where this is going, these possible changes to the zoning ordinance to help correct some past blanket zoning ordinance that has kind of wreaked havoc on a lot of neighborhoods. I think there's probably a general agreement that density is always a concern, and trying to keep that under control. And I think I would find that the path that this is on right now will be far more effective in controlling density than, say, in taking the approach, another approach of, say, in looking at lot coverage. Because I feel if we start going after, say, lot coverage and increasing that in some of these zones as opposed to the path this is on, I think that could have a far greater adverse impact on density. Because I find lot coverage to be one of the best tools to controlling density on lots and in neighborhoods. So I would be very hesitant to go after lot coverage to help some of the smaller properties. I think this would be far more effective. And again, my concern would be any increase in lot coverage opens the door for everyone who's conforming now to even become far more denser than maybe what was intended, even with just a blanket zone ordinance. So I feel comfortable on the path this is going on now, and I do appreciate the effort that's been put into this. I think with the map, I was trying to figure out myself how it came up with what you came up with, but this spells it out quite clearly.
Yes, Mr. Allen.
Yeah, when I get this thing in the mail, I was, to put it blunt, I was pumped, because it's something that, at least on the BOE, we've been struggling, because each neighborhood are unique. I live in Christian Shore, and my neighborhood is different from the rest of them. But you hinted on one thing, and I think maybe this has possibility. Instead of looking for a variance on setback, to get a special exception because it's easier, the hoops are much easier to go through than a variance is, that would take into account the setback of the two neighboring properties, or the three neighboring properties, so that you don't have two houses that are 6 feet apart. So you would have more leeway to give a special exception if there was more setback on your neighbor, from your neighbor's property, the property to the property.
Similar to what we did with the front setback, that we were saying the average of the setbacks on both sides. You can be less than the front setback if you got the average on both sides. So doing something similar to that, but maybe doing it through a special exception, so at least there's some review of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was going through the map because there's 19 lots in Christian Shore that could be subdivided but I'm going through this map right there, and a whole bunch of them are right within the 100-foot setback for shore water. One of them, two of those huge lots are multifamily on them already, so that's that cannot be
And that's
subdivided.
another good point, because we haven't actually looked at the number of units in any of these lots yet. So that's something else that we need to factor in here.
You know, there's only two lots that I know of in the whole neighborhood that could be subdivided.
Carol?
I think perhaps you're speaking about the percentage of conforming that you'll come into for things like the South End and Atlantic Heights. I wouldn't be so concerned about that number being high. I think it reflects the nature of those areas that you don't want expansion to be easy as compared to Elwyn Park or Maplewood.
Yes, yeah.
Because you've got houses that are so close together. Do we ever want any kind of an expansion?
Right. Well, right now, this is saying, the chart is saying is that without any expansion at all, there are only, in the south end here, if we dropped the minimum lot area to 2,000 square feet, still less than half of the lots would meet
Right.
that. Yeah.
I think
So
that could be acceptable. for
that's
that
acceptable, yeah.
neighborhood.
Well, I guess the question is, okay, that could be acceptable. And it may be that in those denser areas, you want to have more, because they're more sensitive. I mean, granted, they do have the HDC oversight as well, but you may want to have more oversight in those areas where there's already, excess density. Maybe it's like a parabol, whatever kind of curve it is. As you get closer to the axis, you can't get any further.
Right. And what we see, I think, is think about second and third floors, that they're staying in the same footprint, but it has a huge impact
Well,
on the
and that's another point I wanted to look at was looking at essentially variable setbacks. So you'd have a smaller setback for the first floor, and maybe as you go up to the third floor, you
Makes
have a
sense.
greater setback.
I have a
Yes,
question.
Robin?
What's the next step in this process?
We're going to be going further, so it's, again, we're going to take this closer look at the neighborhoods and try to identify sub-areas in the neighborhoods that we've already identified. And we're going to be working with other staff, trying to develop this data layer for front yard setbacks and try to get as focused as we can. And then we'll be coming up with recommendations, either changes to existing zoning regulations, the regulations for existing zoning districts, proposing some 1 or 2 or 3 new districts, and looking at a neighborhood by neighborhood basis at the zoning changes. And we haven't determined yet, what the timeline is for that, how long that's going to take. This is a huge effort to do this. We may want to take some low-hanging fruit, just as set up the process, but maybe say, well, Elwyn Park's an easy one, and Atlantic Heights might be an easy one because it's so unique. But as we get into neighborhoods where there's a little bit more ambiguity about which way to go, we might want to take a little bit longer with those. So this is our approach. We're really looking at this as in the next fiscal year, we'll be starting our work, believe it or not, on the next master plan. And we're hoping that's due to be adopted.
Don needs a minute. You'll be done.
We just finished. It's my turn.
It's due to be adopted in 2015, and that's only 5 years away. So it doesn't mean you're going to be working on it. It means we're going to be working on it to begin with. And I think one of the things we're going to be looking at is neighborhoods. The existing master plan, as I've said before, has laid down some. It was a great consultant to begin with, and has laid down some, has set a good basis, I think. But I feel that it needs to be a little bit more focused because our neighborhoods are so important in Portsmouth, and I don't think we paid maybe enough attention to neighborhoods at that time. So I think that we'll be focusing on that, not just zoning, but streets and sidewalks and all that sort of thing, trying to do it. And so this will be a good starting point for looking at the master plan. So I'm thinking that, we'll be working on this for at least the next 6 months and probably longer.
Rick, would it make sense, and I think what I'm hearing from the Board of Adjustment and some of our members, use Elwyn Park, for instance, I think we said there were 21 lots that could be, quote, subdivided. Do you have, I'm assuming in your GPS system, could we highlight those 21 lots, show where the house is located? Because I think, as Arthur said, I think there's 2 that certainly you could put a house there tomorrow, or Christian Shore. You have that number, but in reality, if you've got the whole lot, and if we could just have a map that shows of those 21, here's where the house is now.
Or we may just say, we could do that, or we may say, have the staff do that and look at them and report back to you and saying, well, we actually found out that there were only 5. You know,
Right,
that might
based
be-
on current.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because the number is in fact true, but, if you've got a $500,000 home and you can make 2 lots out of it, chances are it's not going to happen, so. But I think we've got about another 5 minutes or 10 minutes max. I want to make sure we get our public hearing started on time. ML?
I would like to ask you and everybody here whether we could ask, we could ask staff to actually proceed, and I don't like spot zoning, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. I'm going to call it the neighborhood zoning initiative, where we're going to look perhaps neighborhood by neighborhood. In other words, I don't want to wait for the next master plan to address some of these issues, especially because, as you laid it out, Rick, so well, particularly Elwyn Park, it seems like a no-brainer. And of course, I think there's some other issues that we need to look at, but I don't think that I want it to stop until 5 years hence. I actually think within the next number of months, if everybody's in agreement, we can actually recommend to the council some changes.
And like you say, start with the easy ones first.
Yeah.
Elwyn Park or...
Yeah, see how it goes.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
My
David?
only comment I would add to that is if we're going to pick some of the ones that appear to be no-brainers, I think they should be very comprehensive in terms of what it addresses, not strictly lot size and frontage, because in terms of nonconformity, I would have to say the vast majority of it is due to setbacks as opposed to lot size. So if the point of this is to clean some of these things up, get it to greater conformity and work on, let the homeowner have more flexibility and lower the caseload, I think setbacks is a much greater driving force than, say, lot coverage. I think it makes sense in terms of rezoning some of these and making sense of the lot sizes, but I think setbacks is a key variable in all of this. So if we do pick one to go with, I would like to see be far more just more comprehensive and include some of those other zoning ordinance
To make your life
requirements.
easier, not more difficult, I'm assuming on your end.
I want the hours the planning board has.
Last year or this year?
You can have them.
Anytime, we'll swap.
But I think that is important, and I think that I guess the point of tonight's meeting was to get some initial feedback, and I think everybody seems pretty excited about what this could be, so my thought is we'll let the planning department put together more information. I know it's in its infancy stages, but I think if we get both boards, we collaborate, I think we can do something pretty well, so, Alan?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Dave was saying. As a for instance, on the Atlantic Heights, many of the property line goes right down the middle of the house. So anything to change your shutters, you almost need a variance, So something very precise and, like in that particular neighborhood, they almost need their own zoning ordinances, period. And what I would like to see is when we finally adopt it, is that something that is really concrete, because as a homeowner, I would find it very frustrating, the zoning ordinance is this today, and now we made a change, and then it's not quite right, and then 3 months later, we change it again and change it again. Personally, I would rather delay the implementation, not indefinitely, but, delay it and make sure that we get it right the first time around, and because from the first one we do, we're going to learn some mistakes, and when we do the second one, and I presume everybody's pretty much in agreement in which ones are the two you're probably going to start, going to start with.
I think that one thing another way to approach this, and we'll look at this more carefully, is that the ones that seem easiest to do are the SRB districts, Elwyn Park, Panaway Manor, Maple Haven. Those are the ones that have fairly consistent things. For some reason, they were all developed, 7,000 or 8,000 square foot lots, and the zoning was bumped up to 15,000. So you can really get a lot of them into compliance pretty quickly, So we may actually focus on that area first. And I agree with you on Atlantic Heights. That is definitely a unique thing, and it may be, as you say, that it needs its own zoning ordinance. It needs something, just a totally different section of the ordinance, because it's such a special place.
No. We've got maybe another 5 minutes if we just want to get some wrap-up comments. We won't get to signage tonight. I want to make sure that we can get up there for our public hearing, but I think it gives the owners flexibility. Hopefully, it lightens the Board of Adjustments load, brings more properties. I live in Elwyn Park, so I kind of know firsthand some of the issues that we face out there, but I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions, so we'll start with John Rice.
Did I miss something? Do you have have you calculated the average setbacks in some of these?
We know, we don't have that information yet.
Because that seems to be critical, too.
Right. That's what we need to, we started with the easy stuff first.
I was going to say.
What can I say?
So, Charles, did you have a comment? And then Rob.
Yeah, I think it's obvious from the eye chart that you had that this is like a reverse archaeological dig when it comes to reducing these things. Obviously, the areas that were developed latest are the most uniform, and the one where a small tweak is going to make the biggest difference, as you saw. I'm not as concerned when you get down to the areas that predated zoning. It's not surprising that you're not going to change the numbers and have a whole lot suddenly pop into compliance. So, certainly some effort would go there, but I don't think there's going to be a big payoff in trying to massage the guidelines into getting everything into compliance. And as we said before, when you have that sort of density, it's appropriate that we look carefully at changes to those areas where there's very little flexibility in what can be done. So I think this is going in the right direction, and I think the low-hanging fruit approach is a real good way to go, because you'll get the process under control a little bit.
Thank you. Robin?
I have an agenda here dated October 21st from Rick Tainter that says we're discussing sign regulations tonight. This is a matter of public record, and there are people here in the audience who are attending just to hear that in particular. So why are we not covering sign regulations tonight, and when are we going to cover them if not?
We didn't have time tonight. We have a public hearing scheduled for 7 o'clock. Do we, and I'm assuming because we didn't cover it, Rick, that we will. We just, Planning Department will set a work session up.
If you want to do it at your next meeting, we could do it then.
Sure. I think that's great. So
when is your next meeting?
November 18th.
When is it?
November 18th.
Third Thursday in November.
Okay, great. So we're telling the audience here
Right.
who care about the sign regs,
And
and
it
a lot
was-
of people are watching tonight because they want to change in the sign regs.
And we
for
understand that, and
business
it wasn't to specifically omit this. I would rather get through the neighborhood zoning comprehensively, which I feel we did tonight, rather than kind of skirt through that to get to signage and nothing gets accomplished. So we can address it next month. We'll probably allot an hour for that as well, and we'll do the same exercise next month.
When you put something out like this on an agenda item, it's sort of disrespectful to the community that you're not covering it.
Oh, I'm sorry that you feel that
Because they're
way.
all very passionate about this issue. So
as we-
hopefully we will spend a whole session on this
We
issue
will,
next time.
and talk about passion. There's nobody more passionate about signage than this board
Excellent.
that has spent 2 or 3 years on signage. So it wasn't a disrespect to anybody. We like to do it methodically, that now we have zoning out of the way, now we can focus all of our attention on signage, not shoehorn one against the other. So, my apologies that we didn't get to signage, but we will. So I'd rather we get one done and out of the way and then have another hour to allocate to signage. So I think that's the proper way to do it, so thank you. That being said, I don't want to be late. I want to thank everybody from the Board of Adjustment for coming. I think it's always important. I think a lot of things came out of tonight's meeting, so thank you. We'll take about a 6-minute break, and then we'll start our public hearing at 7 o'clock. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's regular meeting of the Portsmouth Planning Board for October 21st, 2010. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We have 2 minutes. Approval of the minutes from the August 19th, 2010 Planning Board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Item 2 is the approval of the minutes from the September 16th, 2010 Planning Board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
Chairman, I'll abstain for the record. I wasn't here, so.
Okay, for the September 16th?
Correct.
Thank you. We will get on to, we have 2 items tonight under old business. I'll read in item A, and then I'll ask if Rick Tanner can give us an update. The application of the City of Portsmouth owner for property located at 155 Parrott Avenue, requesting site plan approval for the renovation and expansion of the Portsmouth Middle School with related paving, lighting, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 128 as lots 15 and 16 and lies within the municipal district.
As noted in the memo, the applicant has indicated that they need more time to address the drainage issues, the off-site drainage issues, and so they have requested that the matter be postponed to the board's November meeting.
Okay?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. We'll go on to item B, the last item under old business, the application of Richard and Linda Harding owners for property located at 1808 Islington Street, requesting preliminary and final subdivision approval to subdivide 1 lot into 2 lots with the following. Proposed Lot 1 having 64,951 square feet and 140 feet of continuous street frontage on Islington Street, and proposed Lot 2 having 17,400 square feet and 100 feet of continuous street frontage on Islington Street. Said property is shown on Assessor Plan 241 as Lot 15 and lies within a single residence B district. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recusing myself.
Okay.
Chairman,
Yes.
I'll be recusing myself as
Okay.
well.
Anyone else? Mr. Gladhill, you'll be a voting member for this application? Thank you. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Jeff Clifford, Altus Engineering, representing the applicant. And as you said, last time we were before the board on September 16th, we went through the entire proposal. There was a little recap that a 17,400 square foot lot being taken out of a, subdivided from a 1.89 acre parcel. It's in the SRB zone, and it meets all the zoning requirements. The applicant proposes a single-family home at the site. There'll be, as part of the process that we went through, there was a series of cross easements that were proposed. They went before the city council, and September 7th, those were approved by city council. The applicant will be constructing a sewer as part of this work, and that sewer will come up Plains Avenue and will provide sewer service to the existing farmhouse, and it'll also provide sewer service to the new lot that's being created, and we're also going to bring it sewer service over to the adjacent lot, which is the abutters lot, which is owned by the Pattersons. At last meeting, there was several questions from the board and the abutters. There was some allegations made about the traffic and safety along Islington Road regarding backing out into the roadway. There was also questions about the sewer, whether the sewer was could be built as gravity. There was questions about supposed flooding in the area. So the planning board sent this back to technical advisory committee to deal with some of these issues. A little unusual for a subdivision of this sort, but because those, there was the questions that was raised, so it went back to technical advisory. And we met with them on October 5th, and coming out of that meeting, there was a recommendation to approve the project. Several stipulations were brought forth, and I'll, what I'd like to do is just go through the various issues, and then I'll summarize at the end with the stipulations. The We provided revised plans to the planning board on October 13th, and those included some notes that were added at the request of the Technical Advisory Committee. And also there was an extension of an easement, that drainage easement out to Islington Street. So going to the issues, the three issues that have been brought up and went to Technical Advisory was the traffic site distance. The project, this is an overview of the site. In purple is the 1.9 acre lot. Lot 2, which is the lot being carved out, is the 17,400 square foot lot. Islington Street, Plains Avenue. This shows several easements, but in terms of the coming out onto Islington Street, we looked at the site distance from the center of the lot. We don't exactly know where the driveway is going to go because that will be part of the building permit process and the driveway permit process. But in both directions, there was 500 feet of site distance, and we provided photographs to you of that. This is a 30-mile-an-hour road under AASHTO requirements that you only need 200 feet of site distance. So the Technical Advisory Committee recognized that we had more than adequate site distance along here. And of course, Plains Avenue has been cut off from the recent improvements that were done in Islington Street. And so that you have less traffic turning here. The abutter had made a question about the existing house and putting a driveway here and why that would cause issues, but the police and the remainder of the Technical Advisory Committee didn't have an issue with that. One stipulation, though, that was brought up was that there may be some concern about people backing out into Islington Street. I know the abutter said they have some issues backing out into Islington Street. And so what the stipulation was is that the applicant have the ability to turn around, to put a hammerhead within the site so that they don't have to back out into Islington Street. And we certainly agree to that. Moving on to the sewer service, the site, there's an existing sewer in Pearson which flows in this direction. We'll be building 250 feet of sewer to about the middle of the existing farmhouse. And 2 sewer services would come off that, serving the 2 units that are in the farmhouse. So it'll be eliminating the septic systems that are associated with those 2 units. Also, there'll be a manhole that'll have 2 force mains tied into it. As part of the discussion, both here and at the Technical Advisory Committee, it was desirable to bring a force main all the way to service the Patterson property as well as Lot 2. So the applicant has agreed to build a force main that would be dedicated to the Patterson property as well as the dedicated force main for Lot 2. Just for clarification, again, this is a gravity sewer that will go to this location. And even though the grade is higher here, there's enough room to work with to make this go gravity in this direction. The water service will be coming off of Islington for Lot 2. There was much discussion about the site drainage. And the drainage off of, for Lot 2, comes off of, some of it comes off Islington Street, but the general direction that it would go in this direction towards the woodland out, that's behind the Harding's house. The drainage then goes into a man-made drainage ditch that goes towards another wetland, and I'll show you the blow-up of that in a moment. But other drainage that occurs in the area is that the city has a drain that drains Plains Avenue, goes by the old schoolhouse, and it works its way overland and gets into that drainage swale. The Patterson property also drains in this direction. Part of their property where they have a driveway actually drains onto Lot 2. This area here is real flat. There may be some water that goes existing from Lot 2 onto the Patterson property, but what we're proposing is to put a ditch along the property line that will be connect into the ditch that's existing and that goes to the wetland. And what that would do is prevent any water that's coming from Lot 2 from going onto the Patterson property, help the Patterson property, help drain their situation. But as part of the discussion with Technical Advisory Committee, They wanted that ditch to go all the way out to Islington Street and pick up some road drainage, which is also, people commented that they had some concerns, I think, more up the street, but it would pick up the road drainage. So that would, what's new from last plan is that we're creating an easement that goes all the way out to Islington Street to this other easement that we are providing to the city. And the sewer has a series of easements, as we've discussed before, as well as this driveway easement and the sewers services that would go to the Harding's property. Now, the drainage, we got into a little deeper at Technical Advisory Committee. The city was kind enough to provide their GIS mapping to us to look at the overall issues. Yeah, and this is Islington Street, Plains Avenue, Pearson, and the drainage area that goes to kind of the overall drainage area, 21.9 acres, is the wetland behind to the east of Islington Street. That's really the dominant feature of this drainage area that's encompassed by this area that I've shown in green. Again, the city drain that I talked about that comes across Pearson from the plains. It gets into the man-made drainage ditch that goes across the Harding's property. Here's Lot 2. The proposed drainage ditch that we come between Lot 2 and the Pattersons. And then all that water goes back to a wetland back here. It's actually a pond that's pretty shallow. And that's all controlled, though, by the outlet here, which is 6 properties over and about 600 feet away from the Harding's property. And then that discharge is about 8 feet of drop that goes to this other wetland. So really what controls this wetland here is this outlet. Like I say, it's about 6 properties over. So we did a drainage analysis using HydroCAD standard procedures, added in about 3,000 square feet of, compared the pre-development to the post-development, added in 3,000 square feet of impervious at Lot 2, and the calculations that we provided you showed no difference at all in what would happen here at the wooded wetland. As I described last time, there's another way to look at drainage, which is to look at the water balance. And what's interesting about this is because we're taking out 2 septic systems that are operating right now, and so that the hydraulic loading from those septic systems will no longer be going into this watershed. If you looked at it on a yearly basis, the 560 gallons a day times 365 days, 204,000 gallons of wastewater now goes into that watershed, whereas when that's taken out, that compares to the 77,000 gallons a day, gallons per year of 3,000 square feet of impervious times 42 inches of rain. So there's less than, taking out more than 50% of the water there. There are 127,000 gallon per year reduction of hydraulic loading to the watershed. And when the Pattersons tie in someday, that would even take out another 50% beyond that. So there was some issues that came up, some pictures that were given to you at the last meeting, and I didn't actually have an opportunity to see those pictures at the last meeting that were provided by the abutters, but I do have those now. And as I'm looking at those, I don't know if you have them in front of you, but they were portrayed as being flooding. What I see there is water going across grass. It's actually draining off of the grassy areas on their property. You can see the tops of the grass blades. So I would not refer to that as flooding. I would refer to that as drainage, albeit slow drainage, but it's a flat area, and but there is positive drainage to the back. I think on the Patterson's property, part of some of their issue might be that the septic system that's at the rear of their property that's built up about 4 feet may actually be impeding some of the flow. But again, the ditch that we're providing is going to be a benefit. So there's several benefits that are being provided to the public, both the easements that we have going across the Lot 2. I know Public Works was very supportive of us providing, Lot 1, I'm sorry, very supportive of us providing this easement because they have a lot of problems with this drain and trying to maintain it so that it flows well. There's other drainage easement that'll deal with both water at Islington Street, water on the Harding's property, taking out the wastewater loading going into the site, another public benefit. So, in closing, we have minimal impacts. We have these drainage easements providing a public benefit. We've meet all the zoning requirements. We've gone to many meetings for a one-lot subdivision, and we request that you provide approval to us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, your Exhibit 1, which shows the site distance from Lot 2 south along Islington Street and from Lot 2 site distance north along Islington Street. It is your representation that you have over 500 feet of site distance, and I'm curious to know from what point to what point was that measured? And let me tell you why I'm asking the question. When I looked at that, I'm having a hard time, as a practical matter, seeing 500 feet. Because sitting in a car coming out of the driveway, you have the length of the hood and the engine and all of that, and you're looking left and right. I can't see where 500 feet came from. So I'm curious to know from what point to what point was that measured?
Okay, well, one of the reasons I took the pictures the way I took them is that you like to see a vehicle in each one of those pictures as they're approaching. And I think I had the zoom different on the two different pictures. But where those vehicles, I measured to where they were after they passed, and they were 500 feet away. So that's one point, so the far point. The other point where I took the picture from, it looks like I'm about probably 7 feet off the white line there. And granted, if you were 3 feet back further, say 10 feet, some of these shrubs, especially looking south, need to come out. We recognize that.
That's specifically what I was getting at.
Oh, we definitely recognize that.
I don't know whose responsibility that
well,
would
as part of
be.
the driveway permit, I think that would be addressed as part of the final driveway permit. Because we want to know where the driveway is going to go, for one thing. Right now, we don't know until the building's designed, until the driveway's laid out. But the Public Works will have another shot at that issue. But we recognize that some trimming needs to be done.
Yeah, I was concerned because, I mean, clearly, all those bushes have to do is grow out a little bit, and there goes your 500
Sure,
feet.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
okay, thank you.
Ms. Hayden?
And just to follow up on that, you said Ashtoe is 200 feet in a 30
Correct, for 30 mile an hour.
Okay, and you were talking about 500 feet
Correct.
being available.
Yeah.
Okay. And another unrelated question. On the drainage, I know TAC wanted the drainage swale to go all the way to Islington Street. How much runoff is that picking up from Islington that's going to be added? Where does that water go now? Do we know?
Well, I don't have detail way up here, but it's not a large drainage area.
Jeff, can you just grab the mic with you? Thank you.
My understanding is it's not that large an area in normal storms, but there is this issue that on much larger storms, that there's actually a watershed on the other side of Islington Street doesn't have a place to go. There is some kind of a ditch here that must drain well normally, but from my understanding, on a very large storm, it actually can cross Islington Street, like we might have had this spring. So I don't have super detailed information about all this, but the grade from here over is going this direction, so it really can't go much further than here. And in this direction, I think some of it goes through Lot 1 to get to the back. So I think you're only capturing about that much of the Islington Street runoff. I mean, I think some of the people that had issues were way up here, and it's completely unrelated to what we're doing.
So in a major storm event, if I understand you correctly, it's a little bit of the paved surface of Islington Street that you'd be picking up, plus...
Well, we're always taking some, because you got half of it, road's crowned, so you're always taking half of it.
Right. And then in a major storm event, it may pool on that other side of Islington Street, flow over Islington Street to this side, and then you might pick up some, but it's not it does not look to me like it's a substantial.
No, that's got to be a
amount.
highly unusual storm, but, and it seems like there must be some issue why that didn't get graded out there. Maybe a driveway blocks it or something, but.
And what would be happening with this swale? I mean, that water's going somewhere now anyway. If it's flowing over Islington Street, it's going across what is currently Lot 2 presumably, but this is directing it to that swale?
Correct. When you build Lot 2 out, you're going to build up some of the grade in front of the house, and you're going to make sure that it's graded to that ditch and gets around the front of the house.
Thanks.
I just have two questions. With this open drainage, I'm assuming that there's a setback for the state to septic systems for open drainage ditches?
For something like this, it'd be 35 feet.
And do you know where the edge of Mr. Patterson's septic system is? Have you located that? Because my concern is it says here approximate location. Are we creating a ditch that's going to make Mr. Patterson's septic non-compliant?
My understanding is, from talking to the state on this issue, is this type of ditch. I think we are close to 35 feet. You're right, I don't have the exact location. I'd have to have their septic system plan. But my understanding is if you're far enough above the water table in this situation, that if you're not intercepting the water table, that the 35 feet wouldn't necessarily even apply to that. So, we could have that as a stipulation that it meet any state requirements, but.
I think the water table here on a storm is pretty high.
During a storm, but that's not necessarily the permanent water table. The state's concerned about permanent water table if something, would turn into, say, a wetland. In this case, where even this ditch that's like 2 feet deep, which is further downslope, the very bottom of it was at one time delineated as a wetland, but it's still questionable even then if it's a wetland. So we're talking about being 6-9 inches deep. We don't anticipate interrupting the water table, especially since I look at the way the septic systems are there. They wouldn't have been able to have been designed the way they are unless it was, if the water table was as shallow as 6 inches.
So if you don't intercept the water table, what's the setback from the drainage ditch?
I don't know if I can quote you on I don't think it counts as a drainage ditch if it's that.
Okay. That's something that I just want to make sure.
Water
that
course.
I'll pull it.
A water course versus a drainage ditch.
Right. And again, I'll use Mr. Coker's overused phrase of unintended consequences. I think the drainage ditch is a great idea. I think this plan is dramatically improved. Has there been any conversation with, I guess, Ms. Korcher about extending that easement through Mr. Patterson's up to her lot?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I think those are all the questions that I had. So, Mr. Gladhill?
The grass swale, is it also designed to collect water from the Patterson property too, or is it just designed to prevent it from going onto the Patterson property?
Jeff, do you want to just grab the... Thank you.
If you've got better eyesight than I, you can actually see some of the spot elevations that are on here. And what you'll find is that, again, in the front of the property, the driveway on the Patterson's property actually drains onto Lot 2. So we'd be taking that water that's now going towards the house and collecting that. Over here, it looks like the Patterson's property has about 2/10, maybe 1, 2, 3 inches lower here. Some of the individual spot elevations, not all of them. So there is some, it seems like there is some water that might come from Lot 2 onto here. And so we're taking that away. I mean, that exists now. So we'd be taking that away.
Mr. Hopley.
Jeff, question on the note 4 on the subdivision plan, Part A. Any house constructed on Lot 2 shall not be built substantially below existing grade and shall have no basement below existing grade. What's the design rationale there?
That was brought up at Technical Advisory Committee. We had made the point that because of the water issues that people were concerned about, that we were taking away water and that water balance that I talked about, that the septic systems won't be putting in 200,000 gallons a year. So it was brought up, there's an interesting point that, okay, if you're going to put a basement in here and be pumping out of a sump pump, then you would need to put that on the other side of your equation of the water balance. But if you don't have to put in a sump pump by keeping things above grade, any living space above grade, then we wouldn't be pumping any groundwater. So that's what that note all came from.
Okay, so that would tell me if I, as a future home owner that wants to buy this lot and wants a basement, I'll truck in some fill and mound the lot so that I can have my basement and still keep my basement slab at existing grade.
I think you would have physical limitations about the width of this lot and the drainage ditch about being able to do that, to raise it up 8 feet. That would be pretty difficult.
Okay.
Mr. Coker?
ML.
Oh.
I just wanted to point to, I had the same question, and so I read the tax stuff pretty carefully.
Okay, I didn't
And
do
so the pages aren't numbered, but Mr. DeFossis went on at length about this, and they did talk about trucking in fill. And I think his point that you can't, with such a small lot, do that to the extent you would expect to have a basement is a good point. But whatever, everybody
Okay,
seems to
thank you.
agree to this stipulation, so.
Thanks.
Mr. Coker?
Thank you. One of my favorite terms is squishy. And in that same note, following up Rick's, the use of the term substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Can you define that?
I'd prefer to have Black's Law dictionary in front of me, but I don't, what's the actual context?
The context is in, I believe Rick said note 4.
Oh, back to note 4.
I'm sorry. I don't have my notes. I was looking for it. I must have left it on my desk. But it's about you not substantially below grade is what
Stipulation.
one of the stipulations that substantially below grade you were prevented from doing something. And my concern was, and I apologize, I can't seem to find my TAC notes, but the use of the word substantial, that's awfully squishy. Is that 2 inches, 10 inches, 5 feet, 10 feet?
Yeah,
I don't disagree with
Hold on
it.
just a
I
minute,
mean,
Jeff.
what we-
I'll let Rick take it.
The word substantially was there because it was trying to keep me from making a mistake when I wrote the stipulation. The issue was that the slab would be not below grade, but there would need to be some footing, so it would have to go below grade. And so it was not to say that nothing could be below grade, but it was meant to say that there would be substantially, if you look at the two parts of that stipulation together, it says, any house constructed shall not be built substantially below existing grade and shall have no basement below existing grade. In other words, the floor should not go below existing grade, but to the extent that footings were necessary, they could go below existing grade. That was the intent of that stipulation.
Well, my concern was when I read the same thing, I didn't see it that way. I saw that.
Well, we could probably rewrite it if it would make you more comfortable. That was the intent of the TAC wrote this stipulation. That was the intent.
I think that particular piece might need some clarification, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now open up the public hearing. If there's anybody in the public wishing to speak to, for, or against the application. If we could just get your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Ed Beavers. I am the owner of 1618, 1628, and 1674 Islington Street, which is roughly 5 acres, which means I own the wetlands. My concern here is definitely wetlands impact. My family has owned the property for 3 generations, over 50 years. I've watched that wetland slowly but surely grow. We're moving a lot of water around here. My concern is by putting this extra water into the swale, the property is going to be dramatically impacted. 15 years ago, I built 1674 Islington Street. At that time, the property was 60 feet from the wetlands. Today, that same house is 40 feet from the wetlands. What I would suggest is that we get some sort of independent engineer to come in and tell me or us what the impact is going to be to my property.
Thank you. Other first-time speakers that would like to speak to, for, or against?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Andy Yeager. I live at 1707 Islington Street in our fair city. My concern is that all the lots in our neighborhood are approximately 3/4 of an acre. I myself have a lot that's 2.65 acres. Properties across the street from the proposed lot are approximately 300 feet in depth, going back to the railroad tracks, and have 100 feet of frontage. In my opinion, the city of Portsmouth has gone to great lengths to ensure the integrity of neighborhoods with the works of the Historic Commission, all the input that's gone into the Islington Street corridor, restrictions placed on setbacks, heights, windows, trying to maintain the integrity of neighborhoods. Putting a lot of 0.39 acres into our neighborhood doesn't seem like a good thing to me. I thought as I worked in my yard today, looking at the leaves that were blowing across the trees, I currently look across the street from my property and I see mature oak trees, cherry trees, evergreens, all of which are going to have to be removed if a house can be built on this lot. I just don't feel like a lot of .39 acres is appropriate for our neighborhood. I feel Mr. Beaver's property will be severely impacted by the runoff that would come from Islington Street, going down past the Patterson property and going out into the wetlands. And also a swale of that size, we all fight the problem of mosquitoes, and I can only imagine, not being an engineer, that a swale would have to be at least 3 to 4 feet deep, and standing water is a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and that water would be there for a long time, and I just do not feel that that would be a good economic impact on our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll call first-time speakers that would like to speak to, for, or against.
Hi, I'm Tom Patterson. I own next door to the Hardings. My concerns mostly, I got to put my glasses back on. My concerns are, how's this swale going to work? I mean, I'm going to have grandkids. I don't want kids falling in the swale. The other thing I have a real concern about is Lot 2 against the barn, the corner of the barn. We got 13 foot 8 inches. Okay? Now, if I'm right, don't we have a 10-foot between properties to build a house? And if you got 10 foot, so you're going to have 23 foot 8 off the corner of the barn, and you're going to have 10 feet off my property line, you're not going to have but 30-something feet in between the corner of the barn and the property line of my house with 10-foot approval. Am I wrong at that answer? Or? I mean, I know the house is going forward, but you also need 20 feet off the road. You're going to lose all your trees, and they're wrong about the 200 foot because when I pull out of my driveway, I cannot see a car coming around Plains Ave. I have to notch out into my driveway. I can drive out of my driveway and I still cannot see a car coming around Plains Ave. I cannot see it by any means. So that's only 180 feet according to their calculations because you have 100-foot frontage and you have 84-foot frontage. You cannot see. at all. If you'd like to drive in my driveway and try and pull out, you're more than welcome, especially when there's a tractor trailer coming down, going to Market Basket or Demolishers or whatever it is down the street. So it's not right. I mean, I wanted to say, you're taking 5 pounds of you-know-what and putting it in a 1-pound bag in 3.3 acres. That's not right. I mean, I got 3/4 of an acre almost. They got not even a half an acre. I don't understand how you're going to squeeze a house in that little tiny piece of property. I just don't understand it. And I appreciate it. Do what you can do against it. That's all I can ask you to do.
Just to give you, I just want to address one of your comments. I think that the maximum depth at that swell will be is about 1 foot. I mean, it's not deep.
That's fine. But if they're going to do that, I want a fence against the swale because I'm going to have grandkids in the next year, and I don't want my kids playing in the swale. So I want to fence the whole property line. No, that's my. If they're going to build a house and it's going to look like crap, I'm sure, because it's going to not have a basement, it's not going to have anything. It's just going to be a little tiny house, smaller than mine probably, because they can't go back, they can't go forward. It's not worth it. I mean, it's a waste of somebody's money to put a house in there. I just don't understand it. And like I say, Mr. Beavers doesn't like the water swale going to his property and corroding his property, erosion. He's already lost a whole bunch. It's not fair to him either. I don't know what to say, but that's my feeling. I think you guys, if you let that house go in, it's stupid, absolutely stupid. The property's been preserved, the Plains Ball Field Massacre and everything else, it's all antique homes, Sherbin's, Patterson Farm, whatever it was before the Patterson Farm, it's just stupid to wreck the rest of the property. You already built one stupid house next to me, which is a great neighbor, don't get me wrong, but that's only 10 feet off my property line. It's 2.5 stories high, So, I mean, what do we do? We're going to be blocked in by stupid-looking houses against all the nice-looking houses we have in the neighborhood. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a question for the speaker. I have a question for the department. Just want to clarify something.
I'll call first-time speakers. I'll call second-time speakers. Anybody who would like to speak to, for, or against?
Once again, Andy Yeager, 1707 Islington Street. I own 355 feet of frontage on Islington Street and a lot that's 115,434 square feet. So if the guidelines that are being adhered to in reference to this particular property, that means that I could subdivide my property into 6 lots and meet the recommendations of the planning board. Not that I'm going to do that, but I think the impact would probably be addressed if I did want to pursue that in the issue of traffic, turnaround, ins and outs, driveways, and whatever. But moving forward, on a lot of that size, I could bring lots that are much bigger on my property should I decide to subdivide it. Just think that should be something that the members of the board keep in mind. Not addressed as a threat, just addressed as a matter of compliance with zoning laws. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call second-time speakers.
Can I speak first?
You can speak first for a second time. How's that?
Hi, I'm Linda Harding, and I just wanted to point out something I'm sure you're all aware of, that the only abutter who spoke this evening was my neighbor, Mr. Patterson. The other two are not abutters. I have tried very hard, and I have hired, I thought, a very, very good engineering firm to try to make this project as environmentally sensitive as possible. And I just hope that you all realize that we have tried very hard to improve the neighborhood and not the opposite. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call second-time speakers. I'll call third and final time speakers.
I just want to clarify one thing for you, Jeff Clifford, Altus. I did have detailed survey, and thanks to John Shagner from Ambit, he pointed out that they actually did pick up the top of the septic system, which means the fill, which means the system itself is actually a little bit inside of that, and the distance I'm getting is about 38 feet to the swale.
Okay.
So we do meet that criteria. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call other third and final time speakers that would like to speak to, for, or against the application. Seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Coker.
Just a clarification for some of the speakers. The location of the house, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the location of the proposed house is not the purview of this board. That would be within whose purview? I mean, within the setbacks and all of that. Let me withdraw and rephrase. Is this lot a conforming lot as proposed? Conforming in the sense of frontage and setbacks and everything else?
Yes.
Okay. The gentleman that said he could do 6 lots, he would have to have how much frontage on each lot? 100 feet. So if he had 600 feet, he theoretically could do that. So I think the lot itself is a subdividable lot. I mean, by our regulations and our requirements. So I think the issues are difficult. I'm not exactly 100% warm and fuzzy with this one, but I think the TAC has done a very good job, and I think the Hardings have, in fact, secured good professional advice and assistance in this, and I think they're to be commended for that. And I know the area. It is what it is. So I just wanted to make sure first the conforming lot and all of that sort of stuff. But anyway, that's.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to come before us to create a non-conforming lot.
Just want to make sure. That's
no,
all.
But that's a good point.
For the speakers, yeah. Thank you.
I think we need a motion for discussion. Ms. Geffert?
I move that we accept, actually, let me go through to be very clear. I would move to vote to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval with the stipulations noted. Do I need to read them, or do I?
You can just reference the fact.
Reference them. So it would be the 5 stipulations to be completed prior to filing of the plat, and then the other 4 to be completed prior to the issuance of the building permit.
Second.
Second. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Coker.
I found my notes. It's page 2 of the memo. Refers to note 4, A, B, and C. The subdivision plan shall include notes as follows. Any house constructed on Lot 2 shall not be built substantially below existing grade. I would urge the board to clarify that a little bit better, and I'm not sure how, but substantially, you know, that could be an inch, it could be 2 feet. So maybe Rick would have a little bit better insight as to what substantially means. Rick or Rick.
I was going to recommend that perhaps the phrase substantially below existing grade is by itself superfluous. And maybe we could say shall not have any floor level below existing grade. Just delete the shall not be built substantially below existing grade, and just say any house constructed on Lot 2 shall not have any floor below existing grade. That would just.
If that's the intent, then I think that's a good solution.
I accept that.
Okay. Ms. Hayden?
And to be clear, Rick, this is note 11 on the, it made its way onto the subdivision plan. So that, at this point of the game, is what the stipulation should be, that to modify note 11 on the plan to read what you just said.
Okay.
Correct.
Hayden? Yes.
And to continue, you know, my read of the drainage, I understand the the gentleman is concerned with additional water being added to that wetland. I'm curious, since we consider you Mr. Drainage, or I do, what are your thoughts on whether there is additional runoff being added to there that's not already going there? I don't see that, but.
My personal opinion is that the small amount of increase in runoff is far offset by taking septic systems out of service. That I was opposed to this last time we saw it. I was sensitive to the needs of the neighbors with drainage, and I know death by 1,000 cuts, but I just think environmentally this has such a positive impact that the increase in runoff is so small that I don't think you can actually measure it. Just my opinion, so. Mr. Coker.
Also, I just want to make sure, as opposed to a stipulation, perhaps maybe just something that happens further along the process, and it was referred to as the driveway permit. I agree with Mr. Patterson in that let's see, how do I phrase this tactfully? I'm not comfortable with the statement of 500 feet of sight distance. I mean, I may only have one eye, but at least it works. And I looked at that down the road, and I had a hard time finding. I suppose if you stood back a certain place and looked down on the opposite side of the road and all that, you could get 500 feet. But my concern would be the bushes. And those will have to be cut back, period. I mean, they just, to make in what I would consider a safe sight distance. Now, the driveway permit, I think that was mentioned, will that be part of the driveway permit to tell the property owner that they must do X and Y and Z? That's a yes?
That's a yes from me.
Right.
Am I hearing
Yes.
anything different over in
Yes,
Point of Director Land?
and it will be not 500 feet, but 200 feet, because that's what we understand is required at the speed
Okay.
limit. So,
I think even 200 feet.
but that, in other words, the 500 feet was made, I believe, was made as a statement to say we're far in excess of what we need. But 200 feet is what they need.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with that statement, but that's okay. As long as the bushes can be required to be trimmed back, that would be my concern.
It's just a point of clarity. Only 100 feet of bushes could be trimmed back because there's only 100 feet on Lot 2.
That's true. Thank you.
So, any other comments or questions? I too would like to the maker of the motion, add a stipulation that the engineer of record submit a letter certifying that the drainage ditch does not make the abutter septic system non-compliant. Something to that effect. I don't think it's an issue, but I think as a matter of practice, I think that should be included as a motion as well.
I accept that. I also, and I'm going to, we're still in discussion mode.
We are, yes.
Because we're authorizing a subdivision and we've got the holder of, I went out and looked at it, the part that's hardest if you're creating a driveway is actually where the barn is. And so I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate, and this is really directed to Rick, to ask the owner of Lot 1 to have a covenant running with land or something prior to subdivision so that they could, the owner of Lot 2, as things move along, could always ask for the bushes to be trimmed so that there would be a sight line. And again, this is based on both what I read in the TAC report and my own visual that actually it's more of a problem for cars coming from 33 than the other way.
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't know.
I don't want to, I mean, I know that it can be done legally, but I don't know whether as a matter of subdivision that it's something we want to do. But this would be the time, because once we subdivide, the two lots are now separate and there's no burdening.
I suppose you could put on the subdivision plan a requirement for a landscaping easement from Lot 1 to Lot 2.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
I don't know even whether it has to be an easement.
Well-
Maybe just to say that Lot 1 will trim bushes as needed for Lot 2. I don't know. I don't want to complicate
I'm not sure
things.
that has that much, unless you
Force.
put it as an easement, I'm not sure it has that much force.
I think I would leave that with
Yeah,
in that
I
driveway
think I'll leave it.
permits
It's too
pulled.
much. Thank you.
I think trees that on the lot I think can be cut back. I believe enough that it'll make that site distance acceptable, but.
Thank you.
And I too, again, I was against this application last month, and I'm sensitive to drainage, very sensitive to drainage. I do think pulling those septic systems off and putting them into municipal sewer will certainly help the amount of water that now is going into the ground, that we get it out of the ground. I think the water quality is going to be far increased. I think drainage between Lot 2 and Mr. Patterson, I think that'll help. So my belief is that there's more positives in this application today than negatives. I didn't feel that way last month, but I think this plan is dramatically different, what we see now, than last month. So I am much more in support of this application this month. So I know it's not what some people may want to hear, but I think environmentally it's a much better plan. So those are my only comments on that. So are there any other comments for the board? That thing, I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. So thank you.
Yes.
Check on the Yankees game?
We're now moving on to new business. And if I could ask the boards to make a motion that we can read in items A and B under new business, as read them in separately, hear them as one application, and vote on them separately.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. I'll read in applications A and B under new business, and we'll hear them as one application. The application of Chris and Allison Piot, owners, for property located at 774 Middle Street, Unit 4, requesting a conditional use permit under Section 10.1017 of the zoning ordinance for the construction of an addition to an existing structure and a rain garden within a wetland buffer. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 153 as Lot 9 and lies within the General Residence A District and the Historic District. I'll now read in item B under new business. The application of Chris and Allison Piot, owners, for property located at 774 Middle Street, Unit 4, requesting site plan approval for the construction of a 384-square-foot, two-story addition, 42-square-foot porch, and 85-square-foot deck to an existing residence, with related paving, lighting, utility, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 153 as Lot 9 and lies within the General Residence A District and the Historic District. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. John Chagnon from Ambit Engineering, representing Chris and Allison Piot, who are also here tonight for this application. We're talking about a project at 774 Middle Road. 2 permits are asked for: conditional use permit for the structure and the addition, and also a rain garden in a wetland buffer, and site plan approval because the property is multifamily. The Piots want to remove an existing deck on the rear of their unit, Unit 4 in the condominium, construct an addition and a new deck on the rear of that structure. That is shown on the proposed building dimension plan on sheet C2. So it shows the existing structure and deck and the proposed structural addition, as well as the proposed deck, which is being added. It's a very modest amount of square footage. The rain garden is shown on the northwest of the proposed addition. The rain garden will handle some runoff from the existing parking area. There's also a infiltration basin which is proposed to handle the roof runoff from the back half of the house. So the new addition as well as some of the existing roof. The project was brought to the Technical Advisory Committee on October 5th, and at that time it was a different design than what you see here before you tonight. During discussions with the Technical Advisory Committee, we formatted the design. Originally we had brought all of the runoff, the roof runoff and the
driveway runoff into the rain garden. That made the rain garden much larger, and the Technical Advisory Committee felt that we could just treat the pavement runoff and make the rain garden smaller, and that would be a better project in the end. So we agreed with them and redesigned the rain garden. There was a condition that we meet with the DPW and Peter Britz and show them that redesign, and we've done that, and that they would approve that condition. We met with the Conservation Commission regarding the conditional use permit on the 13th of October, and they are recommending approval to you. Their one stipulation was a note on the plan that the applicants remove some debris which has accumulated over the years in this area. It's sort of a backyard area, so there's some miscellaneous debris which will be removed as a part of this project. When we met with the DPW and Peter Britz, there were some further revisions to the plans, and I'd like to hand some of those out. I will have the applicants hand out a plan showing the revisions we've made as a result of that meeting on Monday of this week. I apologize, it wasn't in time to get that into your packet, but what I've done is highlighted the specific changes with clouds on the drawings that you have before you. So they're the same drawings that were submitted, but where we've made changes, we've highlighted those for you to make it clearer what the changes are. The DPW asked us to revise the infiltration basin design, which is shown as the detail on this sheet C2 and is shown in plan view in the middle of the backyard. The DPW wanted to have more stone underneath the basin and raise up the inverts to ensure that there won't be water table intrusions. So we've done that. We thought that was an excellent recommendation. The DPW thought we should connect the south roof drain to this infiltration basin. Previously, we had proposed that that roof drain just drain to an area of gravel under the deck. We thought that was an excellent recommendation, so we've shown on this plan the relocation of that roof drain to the infiltration basin. And we hadn't shown the curb material on the parking area to divert runoff to the rain garden. Currently, the pavement is sloped to the northwest, so this proposed curb will take that area of runoff and treat it in the rain garden. So we added a note that we would propose concrete curb as the curb medium for that diversion. In your packet, you should have received some additional information, the architectural elevations, an operation and maintenance plan for the rain garden, and so on and so forth. And I guess that's all we have to present on these plans. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them, and we seek your approval here tonight.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Rice?
Isn't this property in the historic district?
Yes, the applicant has received HDC approval for the addition.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Forgot to
Ms. Geffert?
I just ask that you confirm that the condo association has approved all of this so that we don't give you an approval and then have it all unraveled.
Yes, yep. The applicants are aware that as a condominium, the association has to vote for allowing them to do this. And and that information is on file with the city, that the association consents to the addition, the change in the common area or limited common areas.
Okay. Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you detail or go over again the runoff from the parking area and how that is treated?
Sure. a rain garden is a structural device. If you look on the detail sheet, sheet B1, on detail C, you'll see a cross-section of a rain garden. And the purpose of a rain garden is to act as a biofilter. The runoff rain garden is depressed so that runoff flows into it and is trapped. Typically, you would treat the first inch of runoff in a storm, so you just treat the first flush, as it's called. And the material that is in the layers underneath the top surface, there's 18 inches of a topsoil mulch and sand mix. That allows the water to percolate vertically into the rain garden and provides treatment to the runoff as it moves vertically through that medium. And that's essentially what a rain garden is. There's a planting list on that detail, and those plants are meant to be plants that like that kind of environment where they're being totally submerged for short periods of time. And there's also an overflow so that when the rainfall amount is more than the first flush, the excess passes through the rain garden. Does that answer the question?
And where does it go?
In this case, it exits through a safe, rip-wrapped overflow channel, and then there's a little bit of a buffer strip down toward the wet area.
Okay, I want to go back. I understand about rain gardens, but the parking area itself, it's blacktop.
Yes.
How big is the parking area? How much runoff is there? Is this sized to handle that size of parking lot? That's what I was sort of getting at.
Okay, yeah, sure. The rain garden design is sized based on some calculations which are designed or were created by the Department of Environmental Services in the alteration of terrain permit for the alteration of terrain permit process. So if you look at the submitted stormwater management inspection and maintenance plan on sheet 2, it lists the rain garden design, and the size of the rain garden is a function of the contributing area and amount of impervious surface contained within that area. So it's a simple two-step calculation. You take the total impervious area, the total contributing area, and you figure out how much that is, and then you figure out how much of that contributing area is impervious, and you plug it into an equation which is listed, which is the total impervious area divided by 13.33 and plus a quarter of the total area, and divide that by 240. You add those together and you get the amount of storage that's required to treat the first flush. In this case, it's 99 cubic feet. Our rain garden designed with 6 inches of storage, so therefore we need 198 square feet of rain garden, and we're proposing a 6-foot by 33-foot rain garden, which equals 198 square feet.
I left my calculator at home, but I followed you.
Okay.
That's all right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to give a little bit more background on this. John referred to it briefly, but when this initially came to TAC, it was a much larger rain garden because they were accepting the water both from the parking area and from the roof. And TAC looked at this and felt it could be less of an environmental impact, essentially, by separating the roof runoff and the parking lot runoff. The roof runoff doesn't need the same type of treatment as the parking lot does. So that's why there's that separate set of roof drains going to an infiltration chamber and then going to the outlet. That allowed the rain garden to be smaller and allowed it to be moved further down the slope into a flatter area of the site so that there was less reforming of the landscape. So that was really done. The TAC looked at that in terms of the size of the rain garden and really paid attention to that.
Okay, follow up if I may.
Yes.
I'm not a hydrologist, but this is a question out of curiosity more than anything else. The impact of water coming off of a roof, It is assumed that it's clean water. So that's what Rick said. You don't need to treat it. But I'm interested in the impact of water being put into the ground where there isn't any now. And you know, you're close to a wetland, and what happens to all of that water that infiltrates into the ground and just by logic would tell you raises the water table? What in the calculations deals with that?
Well, we haven't done any specific calculations or groundwater mounding analysis or any of that nature, but what you would tend to gather, if you look at the site in the topography, is that the land is sloping from Middle Street down to the wetland. This wetland area is sort of the catch basket for the entire block. It is, in fact, behind all of the structures that
Along Aldrich Road and all, as I recall.
It's Boss Avenue and Lawrence Street and Aldrich Road. If you look at the locust map on your drawing set, you see a sort of a wide open area where there's no structures.
Yep.
That's a low area, so all the neighborhood runoff goes down there and sits in there. And in general, the groundwater flows in the direction of the topography and then outlets down there.
Okay, so because
we're
the
really
land is
not adding water per se in this application. The water that would have maybe soaked into the ground a little more would run off quicker when you cover it over, but the water balance doesn't change. So you're just kind of introducing it into the groundwater and allowing it to flow through the soil, so it would slow down and also get more treatment. So that roof water would have some treatment, but the water balance was talked about earlier, and we're not changing that, so I don't think we're going to impact.
So basically, the topography is what sends the water in some direction or the other.
That's one of the factors.
Okay.
Soils are another factor, but in general, I think in this area, the water is flowing in that direction. The groundwater is flowing that direction, seeking an outlet point.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Hayden?
John, the trash that is dumped there and the vegetative debris, I assume that's like grass clippings and brush and other stuff. Is that true?
Yes, it's not 55-gallon drums or anything like that. It's actually an old canoe, a wooden canoe out there, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's nothing hazardous.
And is it mostly in the buffer, or is there some in the wetland, or?
It's in the buffer. It's not in the wetland. Yeah.
Would you have any objection if we added a wee bit to the stipulation that says, and no additional trash and vegetative debris shall be dumped in the wetlands buffer?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay.
That's not a problem. I'm sure they can instruct. I don't think there's continually the landscape condominium, so they have a service doing the landscape. I don't think they're continuously dumping out there, but we certainly don't have a problem with that.
Right.
No.
I'd hate to, have as part of this plan it get cleaned up and then others dump there, because as we know, that's kind of where lots of us like to put them in the lowlands. Okay, thanks.
John, just a quick question. Where the infiltration basin's going, have you done a test pit there to determine groundwater?
We have not done a test pit there. No. We raised it up, so it's only 2 feet below the surface. I would doubt that it's going to intercept the groundwater table. Currently,
aren't you like 6 feet below grade at the bottom of it?
It's been revised. Yeah, at the bottom of the stones it is, but the piping which conveys the water is not in the water table at all. That was one of the comments that DPW had, was let's raise it up just to be sure.
Okay. And one other question, then I'll make a comment on this. The silt fence that you're proposing, I know it works, I'm just not a big fan. Could we use like a silt sock or something that might biodegrade? I find you drive by sites a year or two later, and that silt fence just seems to blow in the wind and gets tattered and torn. And
I would rather see you put a stipulation that they remove the silt fence, just given the fact that silt sock is, 10 times more expensive. I don't think it's that sensitive a resource that you need that level of, and the applicants are already looking at a pretty expensive project for a pretty minor addition.
With all due respect, I'm not particularly concerned about cost. I'm concerned more about that silt fence that you see everywhere that gets at the bottom of the toe, and as you know, this may be a different scenario, so I'm not going to tell you, I'm just going to ask, and if you say you'd like to keep this, that's fine, but
okay.
I've made my point.
All right.
And the last comment is I would like to commend you. I've done a lot of design work in Lexington and Weston, Mass., big-time cities, and I've mentioned in this board on several occasions that these type of applications I would like to see with almost every residential application that we see. This is probably the finest residential site design I've seen before this board. Down in Massachusetts, we did it everywhere, but don't lose sight of what this little bit of engineering here does. If this weren't here, I don't think I could support it, but and I don't offer a lot of kudos, but this is probably the finest residential design that I've seen since I've been on this board, so you should commend yourself, the applicant, for putting the money up to do it. I can't wait till it's done. If it gets approved, I'd like to go out and see it, 6 months or a year after it's going, but this board should really look at this application and try to see if we can implement this on other residentials where I think they've got a right to put an addition on their home, but I think they should also go with a rain garden or a dry well or something like this. So I've said enough, but I really do commend you. This is just an excellent application. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure the applicants are glad to hear that.
So, any other questions for the applicant? No. I'll open up the public hearing. If there's anybody in the public wishing to speak to, for, or against the application?
Good evening. Eric Weinrib, 9 Middle Road. I live in the neighborhood, and I'm aware of the application, and I agree with the chairman's comments. I think it's a well-thought-out, modest approach, and very respectful of the neighborhood and the buffers, and I encourage you to vote in affirmative tonight.
Thank you. I'll call other first-time speakers. I'll now call second-time speakers. Third and final time. Seeing no one rise, I'll now close the public hearing. Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, and I'd like to add to the stipulation, which currently reads, all the existing trash and dump vegetation on the property shall be removed as part of the project, and no additional trash and vegetation shall be dumped in the wetlands buffer.
Okay, and this is, just so the board's clear, this is item A under new business for a conditional use permit, which is what we're voting on now, so.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion on the motion, Mr. Coker.
Would this be the appropriate time for a stipulation to ensure the removal, total removal of the silt fence? Under conditional use or?
Well, I think on the drawings that there's a note on that drawing that says once vegetation's been established, the silt fence should be removed. My guess is in this instance, Don, that
it probably will
people looking out their backyard, it's one thing if they go home at 5 at night, they don't care, but I think in this instance, when it gets vegetated, it'll be pulled, so.
Okay, I'll just withdraw that.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, I do.
Okay, discussion on the motion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. We'll now vote on item B under new business for the site plan approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan as presented.
Second. All those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good project.
I'd like to indulge the board on for a second time to allow us to read in items C and D, read them in separately, hear them as one application, and vote on them separately.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. I'll read in item C under new business, the application of Regeneration Park LLC owner for property located at 3612 Lafayette Road, requesting an amended conditional use permit under section 10.1017 of the zoning ordinance for the removal of 16,900 square feet of paving rather than the removal of 19,000 square feet of paving, which was approved on April 15, 2010, a portion of which falls within a wetland buffer. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 290 as Lot 3 and lies within the Gateway District. Item D, the application of Regeneration Park LLC owner for property located at 3612 Lafayette Road, requesting amended site plan approval to include restaurant use in the building, resulting in revised parking configuration, addition of a grease trap, and the addition of 2 exterior doors, with related paving, lighting, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 297 as Lot 3 and lies within the Gateway District. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
My name is Shannon Alta from TMS Architects. Thank you for seeing us again. We were here earlier this year and received approval from you for this project. We're back here tonight after receiving approval from the TAC with a stipulation of a note in the plan I'll explain in a minute. We also received approval from Conservation Commission last week with no stipulations. And we're here tonight to see if we can get approval for putting in a restaurant where we previously had an office space. Some of the information that was updated was revised parking, as was mentioned here in the outline, as well as removing a little bit more pavement, 16,900 square feet as opposed to 19,000 square feet, so we can address parking as well as dumpster location and management that we reviewed at TAC. The one stipulation at TAC was a note regarding seating on the back side of the lot, or on the north side. And what we did is, the note previously said pavement to be removed, install 6 inches of aluminum seat typical. We left that note but added a comment that says refer to the landscape plan for the specific seed mixture, so that way we can tie that in. We had proposed a conservation seed mix in the back. Eric Weinrib from Altus Engineer is here as well. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Hopley?
Shannon, I'm trying to decipher water services, and it looks like you're going to be bringing in a new 2-inch domestic. And then there's a note on the plan, approximate location of existing water service per plan reference 4. You go to plan reference 4 and it says go to sheet 2. Is the current one coming out? Is that what's happening, or?
Eric can speak to this a little bit.
No, there's an existing water service there that is domestic. We believe it's a 6-inch water line that's going to be used for the fire suppression, and that we're going to put in a new domestic service. And the new domestic is going to be parallel.
How would I arrive at that conclusion, what you just said? I'm trying to... As you said,
there's a proposed
word.
Here, down in this corner, it says
2-inch.
proposed 2-inch domestic.
Yep.
And then there is...
Right above that.
Right above it says approximate location of existing water line per plan reference.
Reference 4, which takes me now...
Plan reference 4, not the note. The plan reference 4, site plan for the former Portsmouth Toyota site.
But, okay. Now, so that plan reference 4 now refers to
the Millet plans.
To a Millet plan, and that's going to give me the secret to the fire service. I guess now with a restaurant, the fire service really it's the ante gets up to you. So that's
what I can do is I can answer that specifically, and we have looked at the pressure at the street and utility service, and we found that it is relatively low. And so we are investigating and in the process of putting in a well service to specifically address the sprinkler system for the restaurant.
But does the existing line play a part in that design, do you think?
Well, we don't think so at this point. I think what we're going to do is definitely put in the 2-inch for the domestic. The 6-inch may stay, but what we'll do is probably address the fire sprinkler system specifically with the well. And that's something that we've started to look at. We've had a couple of tests done of the hydrant. The first test that was done in in September was low. The second test was a little better, but still not enough to get us what we need. So we'll make sure that the fire sprinkler system is compatible with the standards out there by NFPA and IBC.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just to follow up on that, I've discussed this already with Mr. Alter, and we've talked about the fact that a well, if it's put in, which it sounds like it will be put in at this point, will require further amendment of the plan, and whether the extent to which changes are made will determine whether it's an administrative approval or it has to come back to the board again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If either of you could refresh my memory, since this was already approved at one point, the lighting for the parking lot and surrounding the building and that I assume is dark sky friendly, but I just wanted to confirm that because I frankly don't remember.
That is correct. We have maintained the same fixtures that we presented previously. There's some wall packs on the building as well as some pole lights. Both of those light fixtures are an LED type and dark sky friendly.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll now open up the public. Anybody in the public wishing to speak to, for, or against the application? Second time? Third and final time? I'll now close the public hearing. In this instance, as was in the last application, I'd like to address item C, which is a conditional use permit. Ms. Geffert?
I vote to approve the amended conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Second. Discussion on the motion.
Were there any stipulations that were discussed on the conditional use permit? I don't recall.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, the Conservation Commission discussed with the applicant the idea of substituting the wildflower mix. The applicant agreed, but that didn't make it into the plan. So if you notice in our stipulations, we've recommended that be included as a stipulation on a site plan, so rather than the conditional use permit.
So to answer your question, no for the conditional use. Any discussion on the motion? Call the vote. All is in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Move on to item D for amended site plan approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval with the two stipulations, but I'd like to add a third. And that is that somewhere on the site plan, we better delineate the future design of the fire service. I really think that's important, and it can be just a note, but we've heard tonight that there is perhaps a larger diameter line going to the building. I guess that's uncertain. We've heard that they're in tune to the needs of the fire service and that that line may not supply the necessary flow, and that they're looking at design alternatives to help with that. But I think it's a big enough deal that it should be noted somewhere on the plan, and I'm not real particular about what the note says, but a lot of the information that you verbally gave us tonight is important enough, I feel, should be on the plan, instead of taking me to several different notes and then really not giving me the answer.
So could we make a note that the design be compliant with City of Portsmouth Building Department or something like that?
Yeah, that's
Keep
fine.
it simple. I couldn't agree with you more on that, by the way.
Relative to fire service particularly?
Right, relative to fire service.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion on the motion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Since we've gotten so good at it, I'd like to ask the board if we could read in items E and F, read them in separately, hear them as one application, and vote on them separately.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. I'll now read in item E under new business. The application of Tain Properties LLC owner for property located at 195 Commerce Way, requesting site plan approval for parking lot improvements with related paving, lighting, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 216 as Lot 1-8 and lies within the Office Research District. I'll now read in application F. The application of Tain Properties LLC owner for property located at 215 Commerce Way, requesting site plan approval for parking lot improvements with related paving, lighting, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 216 as Lot 1-A and lies within the Office Research District. I just point of clarification, the 1-A and the 1-8 and 1-8A, does that make a difference?
They are two different lots. One is 195 Commerce, and there's 215
Okay,
Commerce.
thank you. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Patrick Crimmins with Appledore Engineering, here tonight on behalf of Tame Properties LLC, who are the owners of both 195 and 215 Commerce Way. As the chairman just read into the record, the project is a parking lot improvements project. On October 5th, we received recommendation for approval from TAC with 3 stipulations. If you folks recall, back in October of 2009, we received approval for a proposed office building located at 235 Commerce Way, which is south of 215 over here. As part of that approval, it also included parking lot improvements for this section of parking at 215. What this project basically is, it's an extension of those parking lot improvements in the south side of 215. The proposed project, it's going to include reconfigured parking areas with head-in parking, new pavement, striping, stop signage. It's going to include new concrete sidewalks around the exteriors of the building leading up to the building entrances. It's going to include ADA conforming spaces, ramps, and signage, all located closer to the building than existing. Each property is going to be constructed with a new dumpster pad. This dumpster pad will be constructed with an enclosure. It's a vinyl coated chain link fence with vinyl slats. In addition, on the south side of 215, we'll be constructing a retaining wall, which was already previously approved as part of the 215-235 project. It runs the length of this property line here to take care of the grade change between the proposed office building at 235 and the existing grade down at 215. Overall, this project on 215, it's going to result in a net loss of 21 spaces. However, parking still will be conforming. And on 195, it will result in a net increase of 9 spaces. One of the more important things that we'd like to note is that the proposed project will increase open space on both of these properties. On the 195 parcel, it's going to increase open space by 5,748 square feet. And on the 215 parcel, it's going to increase open space by 12,924 square feet. For drainage improvements, as was done with the original approval for 215, we're going to retrofit all the existing catch basins located on these 2 properties with oil separator hoods. And in addition, the reduction in impervious area will result in a decrease of runoff. For lighting, we reviewed the existing lighting fixtures with the property manager's electrical engineer and determined that they are not dark sky compliant. So the existing fixtures are going to be replaced. These parking lots are lit by building mounted fixtures along this wall, this wall, this wall, and there's 2 parking lot lights here. And as part of the proposed 235, 215 project, there are also parking lot lights that are constructed at the top of this wall. The lights that will be replacing the existing fixtures are the same lights that were previously approved as part of 215, 235. They are dark sky compliant. And landscaping, the proposed project is going to include enhanced landscaping. The project includes new trees, ground covers, and additional lawn areas. So, as I stated at the beginning of my presentation, we received 3 stipulations from TAC. I'll just quickly go through those. First stipulation, that all site lighting be dark sky friendly. As I stated, that the existing fixtures will be replaced with dark sky compliant fixtures. On October 19th, I met with Dave DeFossis at DPW. He approved the substitution of the existing fixtures for the proposed fixtures that were previously approved with 215 and 235. and those fixtures were then emailed to the planning department. Note 2, irrigation system is installed, smart sensors and backflow preventers shall be required, and details should be worked out with DPW. At this time, the owner is not anticipating constructing an irrigation system. However, what we've done is we've added note 23 to the landscape plan, sheet C4, to indicate that if irrigation is installed in the future, smart sensors and backflow preventers will be required, and the details need to be worked out with DPW. And tax stipulation 3, cross easements for cars backing out onto the adjacent lot shall be provided to the planning board. We received a copy of an easement deed which was submitted to the planning department on October 13th, 2010 for the shared parking. So just quickly to summarize, these are 2 existing office buildings with 20 to 25-year-old real tired parking lots. We feel this project is a significant improvement to what's there, both aesthetically and just in the fact that it's increasing open space and reducing impervious area. That's it. I'll take questions. Thanks.
Questions for the applicant? Ms. Roberts?
Yeah, I was concerned about handicap parking, specifically the location relative to the entrances to the buildings. So
Sure.
could you just review that for me so I have a better sense of where the doors are and how they relate?
Yep.
Thank you. I mean, i.e., can we get them closer to the doors?
Actually, well, they were actually located in such a manner so that they could function as a shared handicap space closest to the doors. You'll see for this parcel, there is 5 handicap spaces that are required. There's 4 building entrances, 4 spaces, so there's shared handicap parking. So what we've done is we've actually centered those in a manner that is closest to both doors, and the same thing on either side, so that they can share those, and there it's
Great,
closest.
thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Coker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the department's memo on page 8, I just need to sort of understand this. The applicant has also submitted an easement deed relative to stipulation number 3, which I believe you said that you had done. However, there is not sufficient information to determine whether the stipulation has been satisfied. Staff will pursue, blah, 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 and will provide an update at the planning board meeting. I'm all ears.
Staff did not pursue it with the applicant. I was going to bring it up at this point. And if I could right now, I reviewed the information you provided, and what you did provide was a deed from Lot 6 to Lot 7, but not a deed from Lot 7 to Lot 6, so that's missing. And also, the one that I have refers to an Exhibit A, which would describe where the right-of-way is, but I didn't get an Exhibit A with it. I just got the deed. So I don't think that I have the information showing where the right-of-way is. So I just propose that we leave those 2 conditions in to be satisfied before construction begins.
Sure.
Do you, if I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman? So with the following stipulations, cross easements shall be provided to the planning department. He has done that. Okay, now just hear me out. He has done that. He's provided apparently some document which they could say or feel that it is adequate. Would it make sense to put a further stipulation that it needs to pass the blessing of the legal department or something like that?
That would be good. I mean, we tend to do that with other easements, and I don't know why I didn't do it with this one.
Well, then let's stick it in there.
I've got the language written. When we make the motion, I've already got it scrawled down.
Okay. Just shows you great minds think alike, Cindy.
Mr. Blenkinsop?
I don't know if I'm being overly technical, but you'd also want them recorded with the registry, right?
Got that too, part of the scroll.
Great minds think alike.
Now, I didn't think of that. That's very good.
Other questions for the applicant? Mr. Hopley?
Not a question, but just a comment, if you could, on sheet C8. I'm zeroing in on your exterior stair detail to go from the high lot to the low lot. Sure. And if you could just add somewhere on one of the details for your stairs, because you've got several, and the handrail that's pictured, you've got a tiled stair rise, a detail 3 base, pedestal method with handrail.
Yep.
Just somehow indicate that the handrail's required on both sides of the stairs.
Sure.
So really, I can't find where you talk about that.
Other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you. I'll now open up the public hearing. If there's anybody in the public wishing to speak to, for, or against the application. Second time, third and final time, seeing no one rise, I'll now close the public hearing. We will, we're acting on item E under new business, which is the site plan approval for 195 Commerce Way.
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan for 195 Commerce Way with a modification to the one stipulation. So the stipulation would now read, cross easements for vehicular access and circulation shall be provided to the planning department. This is the addition. Reviewed and approved by the city legal department and recorded at the registry prior to the initiation of any site work.
Second.
Second. Discussion on the motion? I'll call the vote. All is in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. We'll now act on new business, item F, for site plan approval for 215 Commerce Way.
I'll make a motion again, just because I've got the scroll. Motion to grant site plan approval for 215 Commerce Way with the stipulation, one stipulation to be revised as follows. Cross easements for vehicular access and circulation shall be provided to the planning department, reviewed and approved by the city legal department, and recorded at the registry of deeds prior to the initiation of any site work.
Second.
Second, discussion on the motion? Mr. Coker.
Just for the sake of discussion, what would happen procedurally if the legal department, in their infinite wisdom, said, this isn't right? Would the application be held up, or?
They wouldn't be able to initiate construction.
Correct.
Okay, so it would have to come back to us in some form or another, or at least be provided to the legal department in an acceptable form?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, other discussion on the motion? Ms. Geffert.
I think also this is where Rick wanted the stair handrail notation added. Right?
That's
yeah,
fine,
this
yeah.
is.
Oopsie. Second stipulation,
And you
No problem.
add the stair rail detail.
add the stair rail.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
We have one item left under new business, and that is application G, the application of Sarnia Properties, Inc. owner for property located at 933 Route 1 bypass, requesting site plan approval for parking lot improvements with related paving, lighting, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 142 as Lot 37 and lies within the business district. Who's here tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, John Shagnon from Ambit Engineering, representing Sarnia Properties on this application. As you mentioned, it is property at 933 Route 1 bypass, also known as 4 Cut Street. The proposal is to reuse a section of the facility for indoor recreation as a venue for children's parties of up to 50 participants. As a result of that reuse of the building, there's a need for additional parking, and that's the reason why we're here with a site review application. We're creating more than 6 parking spaces. So there's no changes to the building exterior, no addition to the building contemplated herein. It's a change from warehouse use to recreational use. The parking that we're providing complies with the requirements in the ordinance. If you add up all the individual uses, we would also submit that there's going to be ample parking because typically the timing of the uses is going to be opposing. The office use will not will mostly be the 9 to 5 variety, and the parties will be primarily nights and weekends. We met with the Technical Advisory Committee on October 5th, and they recommended your approval, subject to one general condition, and one of those conditions related to the parking that we had designed. There were some comments at the Technical Advisory level. If we refer to sheet C2, we originally had some parking which was in this vicinity, in the vicinity of the entrance, and it was felt that that probably wasn't a good location for the parking because it was too close to the entrance. So we agreed to take a look at it and see if we could redesign the parking lot to come up with the same number of spaces, or to get to the required number of spaces, which we were able to do. That it was suggested that we meet with the DPW prior to this meeting to go over that design, and we did do that on the 18th, which was Monday. I met with Dave DeFoses and Peter Britz regarding the new layout. Unfortunately, there wasn't time. You had already gotten your packets, so that's why I did hand out another plan this evening, and I apologize for that. But the plan you have shows the minor changes as a result of that meeting. I think the design layout was agreed upon, that it does provide for adequate circulation, and there were some plan changes that were requested at that meeting, which I'll highlight to you. The number of handicap parking spaces was discussed, and we did we showed 3 spaces total in the application, but actually as we went over 75 spaces, we need that 4th handicap spot. So this plan shows 4 handicap spaces, also moving them from this location down to here so they're closer to the ramp. This space does get them closer to the door, but actually the path of travel is up the ramp, so we've moved them so they're closer to the path of travel. There was a minor drafting change. We did not show the gas line on sheet C2. Now that's been turned on in this drawing, so that it did show on the first sheet, but now it's on the second sheet, which is good, because that's the sheet the contractor will look at as he's building. We had shown a curb at the edge of this, the easterly edge of the proposed parking area. It was felt at the TAC level that, I don't know if you've been to the site, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but this parking area is at a distinctly higher grade than this parking area, and there's a steep hill between the two. So it was felt that we should provide some sort of a bumper to the cars, so if they were inadvertently left in neutral, they wouldn't travel off the pavement down that hill. We showed a curb, and it was felt that that might be problematic in the winter, so we've revised the plan to show an area of riprap adjacent to that parking to provide some erosion control, and we will place stones intermittently through that area. And there's a detail on the detail sheet which shows that detailed BB, which has been added to the set. So we feel that's going to provide for that protection from inadvertent cars while allowing the runoff to flow. It was suggested we close off or square off the paving in this area, which we've done, and that we look at restriping this front parking to provide better access to the door, which we've done. And it was also suggested that we change the retaining wall from a curvilinear configuration to an angled configuration, because it would be more economically cost-effective for the developer to construct. There were some questions at that meeting regarding the porous pavement detail, which we show the thickness of the materials And the city had, and you folks have had some experience with that on another project, the community campus project. Our detail is different than that, and we feel that our detail is appropriate for this application, and we've sent some information in that regard along to Public Works. I have copies if you'd like, but it's a situation where we're looking for treatment of the first flush of rainwater, and the other type of detail includes more under surface storage, which is not what we're trying to achieve here. We're more interested in the treatment. Also, we've been working with Public Service Company since there is a power line that is above the site or crosses the site. Currently, the property has what's called a joint use agreement with Public Service of New Hampshire to use the area under the power lines as a parking lot. That agreement is expandable, and we're working with Public Service on that. They did not want the dumpster to be anywhere near their power line, which is a reasonable requirement or request because of the operation of the equipment. So if you look on sheet C1, we've relocated the dumpster to that side of the project and eliminated that concern. Those are the changes to the plans. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have about the project, and we look forward to your approval here tonight, if possible.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, on sheet C1, note 7, wetlands along Central Avenue delineated by Jack Hayes on 9/16/10. Is the sedimentation, let me see if I get the right terminology here. I think you referred to it as a sedimentation basin.
Yes.
Is that what he calls the wetlands?
That has turned into a wetland, yes.
And how large is that? I guess the question would be, is that wouldn't be jurisdictional because it's probably less than 10,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Geffert.
Can you explain how this new facility is going to get used? And the purpose of my question is to understand how you access this use from the parking areas delineated.
Sure. The use will be interior to the building. In roughly this location, the access will be here where there is currently access to the office component, so they will have a common door. The parking area the so-called upper parking area or westerly parking area will, the path of travel would be, there's a short flat area here on a raised curb, then a stairway that goes south, and then it ties into an existing paved path. If you've been out there, there's a paved path currently between the upper area and the lower area. So currently, this area here is parking for the building, and the entrance is here. So you travel down this path. We're reconfiguring that a little bit to a set of stairs, and then you'll come down here. But as we mentioned, or as I mentioned, it's anticipated that most of the parking is going to be in this area due to the different timing of the uses.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go first.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Gladden.
Looking at the lighting schedule on L1, it looks like the western part of the parking lot is well lit. Is there any lights on the eastern part of the building or light pole?
Yes. Currently, those same wall packs were installed as a part of the renovation of this part of the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had my comments really concern the dumpster location. First of all, I think it's, I should first of all let the board know that we granted 2 administrative approvals to this back in April, for one for the the area on the easterly part of the building that was renovated, where the Community Action Program moved in, and one for a small structure on the very southern corner of the lot in a separate building. There's a small structure there that was granted administrative approval for a used car dealership with I think, a maximum of 5 cars, a very, very small use. There are a number of uses here, but I guess the first thing I want to say is that the dumpster location should not be shown on the existing condition site plan because it is not an existing condition. It was something that was required as part of one of the prior administrative approvals, and we were surprised at TAC to find out that they hadn't done it, which kind of raises the whole issue of how do we follow up on conditions that we've made, and we don't find out until it doesn't come back. So I think at the very least, it should be moved to the site plan rather than the existing conditions plan. And as noted in the recommendation, that we need to, we think that the dumpster enclosure should be constructed prior to the issuance of any building permit for the new use, just to make sure that the prior approval gets taken care of before we start on a new piece. But I guess there's a practical question I have. At TAC, we discussed what this dumpster is going to be used for. And if this new use is going to be a bunch of kids coming to parties and paper and pizza boxes and that kind of stuff, how is that stuff going to get from the north side of the property over to a dumpster that's way over on the south side of the property? I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense in terms of the path of waste movement here.
Sure. I guess if I could answer 2 questions there. First of all, we'd be glad to retitle that other plan, proposed site plan. The reason that it's on that sheet is that area of the site doesn't show in the second sheet because of a change in scale. So we can handle that possibly with retitling the first sheet. It's intended to be put in. Hadn't gotten around to being done, and it's a good thing because it wouldn't have been in a good place. So to answer the second question, there is a secondary access to these spaces that is over here. So it would provide a exit on this side of the building to get over to the dumpster. Unfortunately, there's really not a good place for a dumpster, and in fact, this property's been around as used for a long time, and I don't know what they did. They just probably never had a dumpster because there's no good place for it. And
sure,
I know that's neither here nor there, but
well, I guess prior there was probably a single use for a long time, and now we're dividing it into multiple users, so each one of them has to have access to the dumpster. Mm-hmm. Is there, where in the building is this located? Does the area that's being used for this use go from north side to south side, or how
I believe it does. I don't have the exact. I don't know if that's. I wish I could tell you. I know that there's been planning on it, but I don't have the floor plans, so I'm sure that we can provide those, though, and I'm sure it's
just you can't actually change the title of this plan because it doesn't show the proposed conditions. It shows the existing conditions. So you'd have to do something different. I mean, if you look at if you're saying change C1 to be a proposed site plan, all of the parking lot in back is still a previous layout. So you're not going to be able to solve it that way. So maybe you'll have to provide another site plan that just shows the whole site, and that might be better to do because we keep nipping away. I mean, I think we saw the first administrative approval, and then we saw a second one, and it's just feeling like we're just nibbling away at this thing without actually looking at the whole site. And I just received an email from Dave DeFosis this afternoon after you sent him your email, and he had 3 questions. One is that new dumpster area easily accessible and well lit. 2, he says, I think the pavement design is cheap. The gravel is only 3 inches below the bottom of the pavement. It will not work, in my opinion, during the coldest part of the winter. That means that when the ground is frozen January and February, there may be an increase in flow. Where will it go? And 3, does the loading area for the 4th handicap space conform to ADA? I'm not really sure what he's I guess it means the access to the ramp, maybe, I'm not sure.
No, he means the width of it. It doesn't have like a striped landing area, but it's 12 feet wide. It's an oversized space on the end of the row.
Okay.
This space up here.
You all set with those? Okay. Mr. Harpley and then Mr. Coker.
Sort of to add to your woes, has your client mentioned to you anything about difficulties in providing sewer to this middle portion of the building? You may not know anything about this, John, and I can understand.
I don't. I thought, though, that the bathrooms were going to be in that newly created core area that they were sharing with the community action folks.
I guess just as some point of information, because it's really not totally germane to this plan tonight, but in part of that build-out of the front section, there may have been some representation to the owner from one of his contractors of a method in which to achieve additional bathrooms to service this new use, which may have been bad information, and in terms of plumbing code stuff. And there needs to be bathrooms for the space, and there's a genuine concern of how to tie that new group, wherever it may be, and I haven't seen any floor plans either, to the sewer, which I guess is out on cuts. And I think he's probably looking at pumping in some form or fashion, but one of our suggestions was, well, have you looked out to go outside? And that's all. I'm just bringing that to you because it might be an option that may have to be looked at more closely.
Mr. Coker?
Mr. Gladhill asked a question about lighting. I'd like to follow up on that. I've looked at the spec sheets. There's all sorts of terminology, full cutoff, all that. What I don't see is the equivalent statement of dark sky friendly. I'm assuming full cutoff is that.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's my understanding from lighting designers, is if you look at the light, it's a downward pointing full
That's
cutoff.
true. I would agree.
Yep.
But I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you. I'll
Okay,
now
thank
open
you.
up the public hearing. Is anybody in the public wishing to speak to or against the application? Second time, third and final time, seeing no one rise, I'll now close the public hearing. Ms. Hayden.
I see we have a note here, this is a question for the planning director, that staff have not had an opportunity to review the revised parking and lighting plans, and you'll give us an update.
That, I believe, is the update from Dave DeFosis.
Okay, so that was
That's where
it.
we are.
Well, then let me expand on that. Relative to the parking calculations, and how do I ask this terribly difficult question? It shows their indoor recreation use as 50 users times half a space per user. And how do we know that's a good number? What if we have a big party there and there's 100 users?
I think that at this point, as I understood it, the parking area was scale, or the capacity was scaled to the amount of parking spaces that were possible on the site, so that it might be appropriate to add that as a stipulation.
Well, and they're shared, I think, John, you said that they're shared spaces when offices aren't there, recreation is, but what if my concern is, what if the office uses change over time, and the recreation use really expands and is really successful, then what happens?
Well, I don't believe it is it proposed as shared spaces, or is it?
No, it meets the parking calc, so independently, all those uses are addressed. They're cumulative, so we're not sharing them in the sense of the calc. So I'm sorry if
Just gives you
I.
an extra boost.
Yeah, that's the way I meant that.
So,
Yep.
So explain to me then how the parking calcs work. That 50 users, that's not in the calcs, that's an assumed number of users, and the 0.5 space is the number of spaces you need for recreational use. So I guess I go back to, how do I know 50 users is a good number?
Would that be based on an occupancy permit?
It would be based on the interior design, if I may, interior design, and you don't have one. So.
And I'm not doubting you, John, but I'm thinking if this is
No.
really successful and takes off over
Well-
time, we don't want to have cars trying to park somewhere they can.
The 50 also comes from the potential leasee, so he's comfortable, he or she is comfortable with that number. So if it's a stipulation, that's acceptable, that's what they're comfortable with.
And I
don't
guess
have a
we as a
problem
board need
with-
to think about what that stipulation might
Let me just
be
get
that would be
Ms. Gaff-
enforceable.
I think Ms. Gafford's going to shine the light of day on this one.
I wish I could. I just wanted to point out that when we were looking at the Simply Green site plan revision, which was up in front of us, we were looking at the interior of a restaurant. And when they said, we're fixing it up so you have these parking spaces in these places, it made sense because you could see where the access was, you could see how many tables there were, and it all tied in. Here we have nothing. I mean, I had a hard time figuring out whether the entrance was where it is now or whether that thing that's a walkway was an entrance. And so I'm perplexed about the interior usage. And even though I don't need to approve the interior, that ties in necessarily to the parking. So, and seeing egress and stuff like that would be helpful.
I think we've asked for that in the past on certain applications. I can recall one in particular where we asked for the floor plans because it had a big.
Well, and then tying with what Rick said earlier, I mean, it's a long way to the dumpster. I've been in the building.
You did get the interior stuff on the previous application, which you approved in April, for the reuse of the office. So that was a part of that. And the entrance area was defined. The fact of the use is that what's going to happen is people are going to show up and probably a large percentage of them will just be dropping off and coming back later. So they will understand quickly how to navigate the site.
What did we get in April? I don't remember this before.
This was an administrative approval in April. It went through TAC, but it didn't come to you because it was
okay,
small.
so we didn't see it
And
in
you didn't, and actually, I don't believe that showed anything that was to do with the space we're talking about. I think it only showed as far as the corridor.
Correct. I'm sorry. It didn't come to this board. But the entrance is the same. The hallway space, the primary entrance is the same for this use as the other use, or will be.
But does it show the rear access to get to the dumpster? And I guess maybe I should, rather than say that, I think I would actually like to see that. It seems it's a pretty important question is how people are going to take out the trash.
Are we in, are you looking for motion?
Yeah,
or-
we don't have a motion on the floor.
Are you looking for one?
I'm looking
No, we
for a
don't.
motion.
Or is the public hearing ended, or?
Yeah, the public hearing's closed.
No, good.
I think I
Ms.
got
Gafford.
one. I would like to move that we postpone this to the next meeting and ask that the applicant come back with a little, with amended plans to show the dumpster in the way that Mr. Tainter suggested, as well as, and that would be to put that on the proposal as opposed to the existing, and then also on the proposal to show either visually or with notes or both, a little bit more about the use, the egress, and the rear egress for the dumpster access. So just a little bit more detail. I'm not trying to put you through a lot of paces, but I think we don't have enough here to say that makes sense.
Do you have a second?
Well, I'll second it, but I'd like to add also, as Deputy City Manager Hayden pointed out, the 50 is sort of this magic number that comes out of thin air because someone said that's what we're going to have. The occupant load, in fact, is going to be determined by a building code analysis for the space, and it sounds like it's an assembly space, and it can be pretty dense in terms of number of people per square foot, depending upon how things are laid out. So probably there needs to be more backup data for substantiating 50 occupants and 25 parking spaces.
There was a project on Lafayette Road, we went through the same exercise, and I believe, so.
Right, you're right.
Mr. Rice?
Yeah, I had some concern with the awkwardness of the parking layout, the way it is. Two things that struck me, and I don't know the technicalities about them, but just for example, if all the parking lots back up to busy streets or confined streets, Cut Street's a very busy street. And so if there was an overflow of, for some reason, that magic 50 number was not correct, you could have overflow traffic, overflow parking on a Cut Street, creating a potential hazard. The other thing that I find very awkward, and I was scouting the place out today, is around the other side, the Route 1 bypass side, what's to prevent people from parking there to go into this area, or are they going to be, is that going to be a viable parking area around that area? And that's a very confusing, nebulous area where people could be turning into one another, or, you know, it's sort of a free-for-all there in terms of traffic pattern. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, if you've thought that through. And last, I don't know whether we discussed this and beat this one to death, but you have that small upper lot, which is so much higher in elevation than the lower, and I'm wondering if the water coming down from the upper one would not create an icing condition in the lower one. I'm sure these things were discussed, but attacked, but
No, I mean,
Here we are.
we're the last
Here
line
we are,
of
and
defense, so. Mr. Hopley?
Well, and I guess I'm just going to, this again isn't necessarily germane to this particular application, but I'll tell you I am concerned. I was in the building just last month. We had to do a certificate for the front. I was given a brief tour of what I think is this tenant's general area, and when that's done, we're only looking at maybe half the building or a little less than half the building being developed, and we've got this massive amount of building yet to go. Is there a master plan for the site? Or are we going to be doing this dance in another couple months? You know, I hate to say it, but I will. This was a giant warehouse with a very small occupant load out front to support the business office, and now the new owner is seeking to subdivide it into who knows what. And I think and in concert with being on a very constrained site, I think we're destined to get up against the brick wall here real fast. So,
Ms. Gaffney?
One other note would be for Mr. Tainer to share Mr. DeFosis's notes on the pervious pavement, because I think there's some concerns that he raised in that email.
Ms. Hayden?
If I might respond.
Mr. Coker?
While we're adding to the list, just to, since it looks like we're headed in the direction of postponement, the Dave DeFosis issue on the pavement.
I think that falls along with whoever said about the lots being different height and
Right.
stormwater running off, yeah.
And the sewer issue that Rick brought up.
and the sewer, not only for this user, but for the rest of the building. I mean, it's not going to go away.
No. Mr. Coker?
Big building.
The more everybody talks, the more I think that magic number of 50 becomes more and more important. Where did that number come from? What happens, and I'm not saying this is the case, but what happens if that number is really closer to 100?
Trouble.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond to some of these speculations, if I might.
Well, I don't think there's I think I'd
Well,
like
I
to
want to answer the questions. I want to, I think I deserve an opportunity to.
We're in discussion.
For
Public
next month.
Public hearing's been closed. We're in discussion.
Yeah, I
Okay,
understand
so-
that.
Thank you. I too would, to expand on Rick's comment, I'd like to see the entire building with a projection of what it may be. Because if you've got a large area that's blank, make an assumption, office, make an assumption it's whatever it may be. I think we've got to have the entire building, an assumption made, and then equate that to parking. So that's was my biggest concern when I looked at it all along. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. So is there any other discussion? No, I'll call the.
Was there a motion?
Yeah.
There was a
The
motion to
was
postpone.
Postpone to November.
For specific reasons of?
Additional information, I believe.
Can I answer some of the questions? Because I would appreciate that opportunity.
No. I think we're in the discussion. I think we can present it next month because we're going to be here anyway. So I think that's probably the appropriate time to do it.
Well, some of the information, in my opinion, is on the plan, so I need to know if I need to change the plan. If I believe it's on the plan, and I'm not allowed to ask you if you agree or disagree, then I'll come back next month and we'll be in the same position.
Yeah, I think just you can present it next month to us. So I think there's certainly information we've asked for that's not on here. So if you want to, right.
I
So
agree
bring
with
that
that.
all together with us, and we'll hear it all next month. So that being said, I'll call the vote to postpone to next month. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. So thank you. That concludes new business. We've got 3 city council referrals and requests. The first one is a letter from Peter Laughlin, attorney, representing Service Credit Union regarding ordinance amendment proposal to Chapter 10, Section 10.517, roof appurtenances and other rooftop features.
Yes, if you recall, at a previous work session, I presented several proposed changes to the dimensional regulations in the zoning ordinance, and the board, one of them had to do with this, with increases in the allowable height for certain types of roof appurtenances or other structures on roofs. And at that time, probably the proposal was too broad. I know there was concern about whether potential impact in the historic district, about potential impact for businesses that were close to residential areas, and as it really did have to do with the Gateway District, you decided to postpone it, and in the interim, the applicants have come forward with a recrafted proposal that really focuses in on the Gateway District and on very specific changes to the regulations.
Do we want to have the applicant present?
I think it'd be appropriate to have the applicant present to explain the changes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm Peter Laughlin. I'm here tonight with Michael Bergeron, the Vice President of Service Credit Union, and Eric Svan, an architect with Gund Partnership in Cambridge. 2 or more years ago, this board, with your then planning consultant, Mr. Tainter, began work on a new concept for Portsmouth, the Gateway District, that will, among other things, and I quote, provide for redevelopment along existing developed commercial corridors in order to enhance the visual character and environmental quality of such corridors and encourage site designs that promote pedestrian circulation and public transit use. You then developed 5 or more thoughtful pages of comprehensive, quote, intensity and dimensional standards to guide the development. Service Credit Union is looking forward to being before this board, hopefully at your December meeting, with a proposal that will breathe life into the framework that you have developed to improve Portsmouth's Gateway. For well over a year, Service Credit Union has been working with the Cambridge architectural firm of Gund Partnership on plans for its new corporate office building. And Gund is in the process of refining plans for that office building, which I think is going to be one of the most exciting proposals that will have come before this board in a long time. Service Credit Union, the building, will incorporate many of the sustainable and green elements that you have sought to encourage in the Gateway District. This includes elements on the roof of the building. In the design process, Gund found that in order to promote ADA or provide ADA access to the roof, a very minor refinement of the ordinance is necessary. The improvements on the roof that are being proposed are all permissible under the present wording. However, a slight change is necessary and being requested to provide the access to the roof. At your August meeting, Planning Director Rick Tainter discussed several ordinance changes, as Rick just mentioned, that would facilitate the changes that we seek. Unfortunately, Rick didn't have the benefit of a plan or a building elevation, as we hadn't submitted one at that point. And so we didn't have a concrete example, and as a result, and I watched the meeting on cable a couple times, there were a number of very legitimate questions, and just when it was described, trying to understand what is really being discussed and what is being asked for. The ordinance that's before you tonight, and I'm going to submit I think you have a copy of it, I'll submit a copy that shows the changes from what Rick had submitted, is tightened up. It applies only to the Gateway District. It's suggested that the proposed change basically allows elevator enclosures to be up to 5 feet above the present appurtenant limit. So long as so the effect is very minimal. And I'm going to submit a couple things to you as part of this brief discussion. And the first item is the ordinance that I presume you have in front of you, but this shows where we made the changes, so it'll be easier to track. Eric is going to answer, he's here to answer any and all technical questions that you might have. I'm going to try to show and discuss in layman's terms exactly what the effect of the requested change in the ordinance would be for the service credit building. And I've got an exhibit that I'd like to submit that I think answers a lot of the questions that were not answered or couldn't be answered easily at the last meeting. Okay, now that everybody has a copy, and there's a board here to my right, and the principal question that came up at the last meeting was related to the height of the elevator enclosures and how high above the roof, how visible would this be, and what this ordinance change would allow and address is shown in red on the plan in front of you and shown in red on this board in front of you. It's under the ordinance terms, as Rick had proposed it, it could be no greater than 300 square feet, which I'm told is roughly 2 elevator structures. And and Eric can discuss with you the reason why you need the additional feet above 10 feet when you have an elevator that's going up 6 floors and you have whatever the materials are that go above that. So in this one area on the top of the roof, in order to provide rooftop access to be able to see some of the sustainable features that are on the roof, to be able to use the deck that's on the roof, which has a trellis, which is shown here. The elevator shafts have to be able to get up to a higher height than is presently admitted. And so that's why we're asking for 5 additional feet be permitted. The ordinance before you tonight, like the one submitted in August, clarifies that elevator vestibules and partial shelters such as trellises and pergolas on the roof, whatever a pergola on the roof might be, are presently allowed at a height provided they are set back a certain distance and do not exceed 15% of the total roof area. So you're not going to have, if a legitimate concern is this going to be some massive thing on the roof, it's limited to 15% coverage on the roof on certain of these items. They have to be set back under the terms of the ordinance. It clarifies that railings are permitted so long as they are less than 4 feet above the roof and are set back at least twice the height from the edge of the roof. The same thing with the partial shelter with the rooftop trellis. And I think Rick's idea in proposing it, I presume, was to clarify that these types of uses were permitted or are permitted on a rooftop. It doesn't allow any more enclosed, usable, or inhabitable space. It just makes a very nice amenity for people that will work in the building. And provide some very attractive views that will be available for people in the building in the good weather. It's when it's described in the ordinance, as was before your last meeting, it seemed like, wow, how high is it going to be? Is it going to be visible? I think all of us were picturing something downtown, perhaps, or even anywhere else that just loomed above the building. And as you can see, the way because it has to be set back from the edges of the building and is only 5 feet higher than what is allowed right now, it's going to be, the effect is going to be de minimis. But in terms of the ability to use that roof in a reasonable manner and to get people up to see, as I say, the sustainable elements of the building, it means a great deal. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and Eric is here to answer any questions or further explain it.
Any question, Mr. Coker?
Just one, Peter. I won't say confused, but procedurally, why would you wish to change the zoning as opposed to just simply getting a variance?
We talked about that because a variance presumably would have been quicker. This case law that says that if the restriction affects all property in the zone, the proper course of action is to get a zoning change rather than seek a variance. And so that was the reason that we followed this course of action.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand, but okay.
Well, it'd be different. I don't want to say it would be difficult to show unnecessary hardship that only applied to this building. I won't say you couldn't come up with some argument, but it would be it's more straightforward to come in and say, we think that this change would be appropriate for any building in the Gateway District.
The counter argument to that would be that our zoning says this, and this particular building needs something different from that zoning, therefore I seek relief with a variance. I mean, just from the layman's point of view, and I consider myself a layman, that seems a much simpler process.
It would have been a simpler process if we felt, and I guess I made the decision that I thought we would have difficulty addressing the unnecessary hardship argument, in that someone would say, this is a result of something in the ordinance that was not anticipated when the ordinance was being drafted, and as a result it applies to all properties, and you really should be before the Planning Board and City Council.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Attorney Laughlin? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe this is a city council referral and request. So I believe we would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the city council enact the zoning ordinance amendment as proposed.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Ms. Hayden?
I just want to make one comment to Don. I understand where you're coming from, but I think one thing with this is this gateway district is brand new. So it's almost like going back and tinkering at the edges of the ordinance that we developed. Because, I mean, I would love to see lots of nice development like this along that corridor. So I think it could benefit other projects as well down the road. And I think it's something we didn't necessarily get quite right in the ordinance, because when we think about height, we all think about downtown.
Well, I guess now I am confused. So when you say as proposed
We have a proposed
by
ordinance.
the applicant,
Yes, which I have reviewed and I like. It was in the letter of request to the city council from Attorney Laughlin saying, we're looking
Understand.
for this zoning amendment. Attached is our draft of it.
but I would submit, just for consideration, I believe that this planning board and the city council has just finished a long, hard slog through the trenches for a zoning change which was seen to benefit a single developer. It just seems to me on the face of it that we worked long and hard on our zoning. I remember the discussions about height and setback and all of those things. And I think they were reasonable. And personally, I think it's almost a no-brainer to go to the Board of Adjustment and say, hey, look, we've got this beautiful building and your zoning says this, and we've got this thing that just 5 feet's all we need, not a big deal. And they would say, sure, not a problem. I just could not imagine the Board of Adjustment saying no to this, therefore leaving our zoning intact.
Okay, Rick?
But I would disagree with you on that, because, as Mr. Laughlin said, in order for the Board of Adjustment to legally grant a variance, they have to find that there's something about this property that is different from all the other properties in the area, and they have to find that those conditions, those special conditions, create a hardship for this property that prevent them from using their property in a realistic way.
Well, if I understand what they're proposing is this will grant them access to their roof, which is going to be a very nice.
I guess what I would say is, if our zoning allows them to build a 60-foot building, they've got reasonable use of their property, and that undercuts any argument for a variance. So I mean, that's basically the case law. If somebody were to appeal it, a variance, the Board of Adjustment would lose, I'm sure. It's just that it's so far, because they have a very big reasonable use of their property, and so they're looking for a nicer reasonable use of their property. So I think it's correct to go, and I probably advised either the applicant or Mr. Laughlin to go the rezoning route rather than the variance route, because I didn't think there was any rational basis for a variance. My opinion.
Well, okay, I respectfully disagree, but that's okay. That's,
Mr. Blenkinsop?
I also just want to address, Don's point about comparisons to other issues we've taken up and arguments that it's spot zoning. I mean,
that's not what I said. That is definitely not what I said.
Well, you made a comparison to what I assume was the retirement community.
It was, and the general feeling of the community, at least everything that I got, the opponents of that, all almost to a person, said that the zoning was being changed, asking to be changed to benefit a single developer.
But I mean,
I think one could make a reasonable argument. I'm not saying that's the case, but you could make a reasonable argument that that's what's being asked for here.
I mean, I guess my point is, I think this is pretty dramatically different, and that this would apply to the entire Gateway District. So, I mean, it would apply to numerous potential properties, not just potentially to one, if that was the argument.
Well,
so, I mean, I guess
as would have the CCRC would have any greater than 5 acres. I mean, that argument was made, and I think it was made well. Anyway, that's fine. It's fine.
Ms. Geffert?
I just wanted to say that I just want to address the point, since we're actually going to recommend this, it sounds like. The changes to what the director of the planning department proposed in August are minimal. And one of the difficulties we were having in August, as I recall, was visualizing what we were talking about. This is helpful, but it's helpful not just because I see this very interesting football-shaped structure, but more because I get it now, which is it was truly difficult for me to imagine how this would work. So from that perspective, and given that we are localizing this to the Gateway District, because frankly it would be very difficult to see this in the Historic District, I think that it makes sense, and it more broadly than this particular project, it will encourage the kind of development that I think we want to see in the Gateway District, which is buildings that mass in a way that pulls these slightly above rooftop structure well out of the visual perspective of those on the ground. So I'm supporting it not for this project. I look forward to the site plan review session, but more because I think it's a great approach to an issue that we were struggling with.
Okay. Mr. Gladhill, did you have a comment?
Yes. In Mr. Laughlin's letter, I describes when we had the work session that the board neither had photos or elevations to provide a concrete example of what was being suggested. I'm not against the idea, but is there any possible way to see what has been done before with elevators, apertures, just to have some visual aspect from what it would look like from the ground, if it's even possible that an elevator sticking above the roof could ever be seen from the ground?
Mr. Coker?
Just one other clarification, just to make sure that I understand what is being proposed, and Peter, please correct me if I'm wrong. What is being proposed, instead of in the Gateway District an additional 5 feet above the allowed appurtenance, you're proposing to change that to up to 20 feet above the roof and the allowed structure.
No, the previous ordinance was 20 feet. And it's 10 feet right now is what is allowed, and we're asking to be able to go another 5 feet above that. The
So total of
last time
15.
it was 20 feet.
Okay, so total of 15.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hayden?
You know, when we get presented with a small issue like this, I think we've gotten really kind of riveted on the small issue. Think about what we were trying to accomplish in the Gateway District. We should be like jumping for joy. Wow, first project in the Gateway. Could it be a more cool project? And
Without question. You're absolutely right.
So
I agree.
we're having a lot of discussion about like de minimis, as I think Peter called it, which I will call minutia. But my own feeling is we should give this a ringing endorsement back to the City Council in a positive way as what a fantastic first project in the Gateway District. And don't forget, when it comes for site review, then we'll be able to get at some of the issues you're talking about, William, and really, focus in on all those nitty-gritty design details.
One final thing.
Yeah, Ms. Roberts?
I agree wholeheartedly, and would just add, in sort of opposition to what Mr. Coker had earlier said, that, we're going to be working on this zoning ordinance rewrite forever. So, just because we spent a long time working at some point doesn't mean that all of a sudden there's a breaking point and that's it. This is just one little tweak, which, as she said, I mean, this gateway, this is huge for us. This is so exciting to have a real, building. My God, look at that. Something we can, like she said, get our brain and eyes around.
For the record.
This is exciting.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, please note that I am in complete and utter support of this project, as
Stop
described.
there. Stop there.
I
You've
am
dug yourself back
concerned
out.
about, as I always am, the unintended consequences. And I will not be on the receiving end of another 8-1 vote. So I will be supporting this.
And I'm going to actually be contrary to Cindy. I would support. I don't really care what this looks like. I don't think that's the reason we should approve this. I think this modification tweaks. Maybe we didn't get it right the first time, and I think based upon what I see here, it needs to be tweaked. whether this is a football or a teacup, I don't care. I just think this particular change makes this that much better for every development, not just this one. So I'm supporting, I'm actually pulling kind of a Cindy where I'm thinking globally that this does look beautiful, but I think that we may have shot ourselves in the foot had we kept it the way it is. So that's why I'm going to
We'll
kind of
find out
support it.
somewhere
Not
down the
to
road.
slight the building, I think it's beautiful, but I'm looking at the whole gateway. So there's no other
Well said.
comments. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move.
There's
Oh,
a
did you-
motion on the
She already
table.
moved.
Sorry.
Oh, darn.
I made the motion.
Okay, and it
sorry.
was
I'm trying to
seconded?
redeem myself somehow.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're right there.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.